really appreciate you guys being here. As you guys probably know, this is the Why Don't You Play Them breakdown / Q&A / making of stream from Scott DeWaz's You're Not an RPG Guy 2020 Christmas special. But yeah, appreciate you guys all being here. Thank you very much. So my plan is to start with some Q&A, answer some questions from you guys in the chat and also on my YouTube community panel, because some people did ask questions there and I do want to get to those. So I'm going to do those first, and then I'm going to talk, and then I'm going to respond to chat on any questions you guys have. Following that, then I'll just kind of go through the process of how we wrote the song, how I put it all together, and then following that, for all the nerds and the serious, perhaps more serious musicians or people more interested in the more tech side of things, I'll kind of break down the mix and how I did things from a production standpoint. But like I said, we're going to start with questions from my community panel. So I'm just going to go ahead and bring that out here. Yes, I do use light theme. You can leave me alone. That's apparently a thing that people get very annoyed with, but you can leave me alone for it. Okay, so I said, got any questions or interested in the making breakdown of Why Don't You Play Them? And some people had some questions. We'll just go ahead and start at the top here. Poliver, light theme is awesome. Thank you, comment, Reddit, and narrator. I appreciate you. I appreciate you and your opinion. It's a good opinion. Will you be releasing an instrumental? And how did you go about the process of writing it? Did Scott send you the lyrics to work around, or did you write the music first and send it to him, or both? I will be releasing an instrumental, yes. I'm not quite sure when, probably in a couple weeks or so. I'm just trying to kind of space things out correctly. But you guys can obviously enjoy the version with the vocals at the moment. It's kind of crazy. It's already hit like practically 100,000 views, and it's only been a few days. So I really appreciate you guys. I'm really glad you guys like it so much. Regarding the process of writing it, yes, I actually started the song first. So basically, and this is how we've been doing it, this is how we did it with Bargain Bin Christmas as well, is Scott gave me an idea, right? He had reference points, he kind of gave me the visual, kind of what he was going for. Honestly, the reality is Scott didn't really know exactly what he wanted to do. All he knew is that he wanted a song. He had a very vague idea. Initially, he wanted it to be a dream sequence, actually, and I guess he decided to write it differently. I still wrote the song according to like a more dream sequence-ish kind of situation, but he decided to make the scenario a bit different. But yeah, his initial idea was, I want this to be a dream sequence, and I want it to kind of sound like a Disney villain song with RPG elements, So we kind of talked that over, and essentially I came up with okay, I'm gonna implement a little bit of One Winged Angel, I'm gonna implement a little bit of the Persona sound, all that kind of stuff. There's a pretty part in there that isn't directly anything in particular, but it's very pretty anime the way that I hear it, which kind of again is a love letter, if you will, to the anime games. So there was that, and then so I got all of that taken care of. I kind of got a general demo together, which I can probably show you guys. Let me check. It's not in here. Hold on. Let me go ahead and do this. So I had numerous early demos that I sent him, and then pretty much once he gave me the green light, he was like, yeah, this is good to go. Then we started working on lyrics. Pretty much 90% his lyrical work. But yes, to answer that question, long story short, I did the music first, then he did the lyrics. So yeah, and again, I'll get more into that in a bit. Aiden Likes Potatoes asks, the one and only question I have is when it's coming to Spotify. I keep hearing this. I keep getting this question constantly. This is something I'm going to need to ask Scott. I will talk with him about it. But I'm glad you guys like it so much and you guys want it on Spotify. We will talk about it. I will see, but that is ultimately Scott's decision. So I'll try and keep you guys updated on that. What part of the song came to you first? And who did the bulk of the work? Asks Pause Break. What part of the song came to me first? You know, a lot of the time, me writing music is like getting high or stoned or drunk. It hits me and I forget how I did it. It's hard for me to say. Obviously, it's different every single time. So sometimes I could tell you very explicitly exactly what part of the song was the first thing that came to my brain. In this situation, I'm not really sure I have an answer. I think pretty early on, I wanted to nail the one-winged angel thing. I'm pretty sure this is another one. This happens a lot, but I'm pretty sure this is another one of those instances where I started with one idea that I wrote out and kind of went with it for a bit and then decided, you know what, I'm not feeling this. This isn't right. Went back, started all the way over and did something else. I'm pretty sure, and we can look here, but I'm pretty sure, getting into Garrett's drives here. Pretty sure there were 2 versions. Yeah, there was. And maybe at the end of the stream, I'll show you guys the early version, which is probably a completely different sounding song altogether. In fact, at this point, it wasn't even that long ago. Let's see, dated November 9th, because we did all of this pretty quickly, honestly. But that original version, I already have no recollection of what it sounds like, so it'll be interesting for me to come back to it. I'll probably remember it once I hear it, but yeah. There's not really a clear answer on what part of the song came to me first. I'm not really sure. Who did the bulk of lyric work? Scott. Want to know who was behind the SNE-US rhyme? Yeah, that was Scott. And I remember looking at that, I was like, that's kind of reaching. But it seemed very Scott the Woz-ish to do that, and I thought it was funny. So I was like, you know what, we'll stick with it. Yeah, that was 100% Scott. I did the "Why Don't You Play Them" lyric. Stupid enough as it is, but I did write that. I'm trying to think of exactly all that. But you could grind for years just to beat that boss. That's something I wrote. Coming fresh out of trying to beat a boss in Final Fantasy VIII and getting pissed off because I had to grind for years just to, like, it was the weirdest thing. And so, of course, that's the first thing I think of. Essentially, what I was thinking of is, like, he wrote an original lyric, and I was like, you know what? I kind of want this to be one of those where, like, someone tries to make an argument for RPGs, but it's not a good argument. So then you come back with the lyric. Why waste all this time on just one game? So that's how I came up with the lyric, but you could grind for years just to beat that boss. Obviously not incredibly creative or brilliant, but just as a little backstory as to how that came to happen. I think I did some of the lyrics, like, adjusted, I suppose. I adjusted some lyrics in the rap verse. That was mostly Scott, though. And yeah, I did pretty much all the lyrics at that tail end thing. The whole, like, back and forth Hamilton kind of thing where everything's just going crazy. At the tail end of it, that was I wrote all of that kind of on a whim. I really just BS the lyrics with the scratch vocals, but it ended up working. I ended up liking it, but yeah, I wrote all that. Yeah. So hopefully that answers that question. Crisp says, Persona series is mentioned as an influence. Was it just 5, or did other entries in the series play a part as well? If I'm honest, I never really got into Persona. But yes, basically 5 was the main influence. The reason I say I never really got into it is just to say that, yes, it was totally, massively an influence on the sound. But, I didn't, do a whole bunch of studying up and playing a whole bunch of it or anything to get a good feel for it, if I'm honest, if I'm just going to be honest with you. The R&D on Persona was actually not that intense, essentially. Did Scott write all the lyrics, which he is credited as doing, or did you help him out at all? Yeah, that essentially goes back to what Pause Break asked. This is from Fab Does Games, by the way. And yeah, yes, I essentially already gave that answer, but he wrote about 80 to 90% of the lyrics. I just adjusted certain things and you know, again, what I already mentioned. So, which came first, instrumental or lyrics? I answered that as well. Instrumental did come first. Before you answer, I'm going to assume the instrumental, since that's how... Yes, yeah. Yep. Yeah, same deal. Do you have any problems with the misconception that Scott fully produced the song himself? From Thorn Flame. I haven't really ran into that. That is a very common misconception with any artist out there. You know, you can say, man, Ariana Grande did such a great job with that track, but she's not the one that produced it, you know? She's just the singer. She's the artist. She may give the final green light, so I assume to some extent, if she does have that power, then I suppose you could call her executive producer. But yeah, no, that is a very typical misconception. You know, I kind of signed up for that kind of gig. But actually, for the most part, no. I very, very little noticing of people not understanding that, you know, Scott did all of that himself. But if people do, it's a common, you know, casual misconception, those casuals. But yeah, Neil Bader asks, did you do a lot of background voices a la Get Along style? Get Along is a song of mine, for the record. You guys should go check it out. Thank you for the shameless promotion there, Neil, for me. Were there just a handful of fillers? I don't know what you mean by a handful of fillers, but essentially all the backing vocals are between me, Zach Frazier. I've never actually had to address him by his full name, so I don't totally know how to say his last name. I apologize, Zach. Fantastic vocalist. It was between me, him, and my sister Emma Rose Williamson, who also did the lead female vocals. So together, I pretty much just arranged who would do what harmony parts. Zach ended up sending actually a lot more than we expected, and again, I will get to that in the future here soon. Just the whole vocal stuff. But yeah, I don't know exactly how to answer your question, but hopefully that clears things up to some extent, excuse me. Again, with all the Spotify questions, again, I'll ask Scott. First bangs on the track, aka the intro, those are your dad on drums, or is that another instrument? Yeah, that's my dad. So it's, you know, it's a mixture of guitar, piano, strings, and my dad, you know, hitting. My dad is Scott Williamson. He's actually a renowned session drummer. Very good. He played drums across the entire track. But yeah, he did those little crashes in there, whatnot. You know, I gave him a demo of like essentially what I was wanting the beat to generally be like, and then I'll let him take it from there. Did you do a lot of stereo / LR effects in the song? Oh yeah, absolutely. It's always a matter of just figuring out how to get things to sit in a space, in the stereo space and feel right. But absolutely. Did you use any new, possibly fancy plugins for this track? Not really. No, I don't like to I don't think there's any issue with fancy plugins, but I tend to mix fairly simply. I like to stick to the things that, like, I know certain plugins give me certain colors. There's certain effects and sounds that I know are great. I love to experiment, but I'm not huge on just like mixing something, trying, you know, fancy stuff just for the sake of, you know, it being fancy. Especially in this instance where I wanted the mix to kind of sound like a Hamilton track, kind of sound like Broadway. I definitely stuck to a cleaner, simpler approach. How was working with Scott in this song? Fantastic. It's always fantastic working with Scott. This is from Ryan Martiliano. Yeah, it's always, he is seriously one of the easiest people to work with. He's such a kind guy. He's seriously one of the sweetest, and I do mean this entirely. He's one of the sweetest people I've ever worked with. Very, very kind. Yeah, it was great. Neil, once again, man, he's got quite a few questions. Good Lord. Was the sound of the song the first thing you were going for? Did you go through multiple versions? Oh yeah, always go through multiple versions. The sound of the song, I don't know what you mean by the sound. Like, did I have a certain sound in my head that I was going for at the beginning? If that's the question, then yes, absolutely. I absolutely did. Because again, like I said earlier, Scott already kind of had a concept of like, this is what I want you, this is my reference points, this is kind of what I'm going for, and I just went with that. And again, I'll get more into detail with that in a little bit once we get through the questions here. Where did you start with that song? Did Scott write the? Yep. Yeah. This seems like a pretty popular question. And again, I've already answered. Music first. He gave me the reference points, etc., etc. Neil's got a lot here, which is great. I'm glad he's got a lot of questions. What did Scott give you when it comes to audio, maybe video? Did anything change over time, or maybe even in the uploaded video? Not really in the video, no. We pretty much finished the whole track and then he edited to that. He just essentially sent me a whole bunch of takes of him doing all the lyrics, and then I just implemented them in, edited them together, made sure everything was on beat, etc., etc. Yeah, you know, there were a few times I called him back and essentially was like, hey, well, I guess not called him, I messaged him on Discord, but I essentially just said, hey, let's see if we can get either a different take of this, or, you know, this might be clipping a little bit here, if we could, you know, fix that, all that kind of jazz. The only thing is, last minute, he wanted me to mix in the I just don't like them. You know, that whole thing in the in-between turnaround spot. Like last minute he's editing it. He's like, dude, I can't get this like to sit right in the track, and I don't want to turn down the song so much. So he sent me the audio file for that. I synced it up with where the video was and mixed it in. But yeah. Hopefully that answers this. Was this a big file? Something with a lot of tracks? Pretty much everything I do is something with a lot of tracks. A lot of stuff is demo stuff or scratch vocals. So I have to count out, honestly, probably like 50 to 80 random tracks of just ideas and whatnot. But even then, we cap out at 217 tracks here. Now, if it wasn't all those hidden tracks and if I organize things more correctly, I think it would be far less than that. But because it's a computer and I just go, screw it, there's technically 217 tracks. So yeah. But I would say there's probably 200 maybe being used, or not 200, like 120 being used, maybe. Again, there's so much that goes unused here, just a lot of random ideas and whatnot, you know, and I would hide it, you know, I don't want to get rid of it entirely, so I just hide it, I mute it, you know, but it still sits in the file. Does this song have its own quirk? For example, how I think it was What If I'm Hurt Again, or maybe Get Along, had you creating sort of an echo in the track by playing it, but recording the track from the other side of the room. Are you saying like my own experimentation with like approaching it? Yeah, no, this one was a little bit simpler. The way I'm sure most of the way that I mixed this or approached it was cleaner. It was a little bit more intentional about getting the Hamilton sound, which again I will get to, about the influences and exactly what we were going for. But yeah, it was definitely in a lot of ways a simpler song. I'm not sure if it has its own like experimentational quirk or anything. Experimentational, really? Experimental. Really complicating the English language here. When did you start working with Scott for this specific song as DBB3 videos? Like I said, the original one, it dated November here. So we pretty much got this going pretty quickly. Let's go ahead and look at date created. Let's see. Yeah, very, very. It all happened quickly. It was all like basically like a month and a half that the whole thing from start to finish got taken care of. So yeah. How closely did Scott work with you on the song? Pretty closely, I would say. You know, he let me do my thing, but at the end of the day, he greenlights everything. He has all the ideas. He's the one giving the initial concept on the whole deal. And then right back at him, you know, we were going back and forth about delivery on certain lines, lyrics, ideas. So I'd say we worked pretty closely on the track, yeah. That's from Kerbals. Thank you for that question. Man, there's a lot more questions than I thought there were. But we're nearing the end here, and then I'll answer some questions for chat, and then we will get to we will get to actually talking about the process of working on the song, anything that I haven't already mentioned from answering questions. But yeah, once again, Eggvation asks how long did it take to make? Probably like a month and a half tops. Did you come up with any part of the script? I assume you're talking about the lyrics, and again, I also answered that question. Lots of similar questions here, but all good ones. I'm glad to answer these. Big influence a lot are mentioning is Persona 5, but am I too far out of left field to detect some Ben Folds? That's from Matt Pekarek. Ben Folds was not even in my brain when I was working on the track. But I suppose it may not be too far out of left field. I don't know. I think there's certain things that I do that probably are a little Ben Folds-ish in the way that I play piano and whatnot. But no, inherently, no. There's no Ben Folds influence. But if you hear it, you hear it. You know, it could be there. Who speaks / sings win? This is once again from Neil. I know Emma does the why don't you you could grind for years just to beat that boss. But for example, Tracy, is she towards the end? No, Tracy records all, as I say it, extra crowd vocals. So anytime you hear why don't you play them, there's kind of just this giant choir of these just vocals. And that's a mixture of me, Zach, and Tracy singing those. Tracy does a lot more of the funny sounding, kind of more cartoony, as I put it, the Winnie Pooh choir voices. Because anytime I hear why don't you play them now, I just think of Winnie the Pooh, which is really funny. But yeah, she just did tons of different kinds of voices, and we recorded them. She did great. She really added a lot of character to that moment. So big shout out to my wife Tracy for that. Was the creation of this song different, harder / easier / more complicated than Bargain Bin? Oh yeah, it was a much bigger project than Bargain Bin. Bargain was very quick, because I mean that was like what, 45 seconds long, and yeah, that one was very simple, I would say. This one, I got a lot more players. There was a lot more coordinating and whatnot, and I love that. I loved the way this one turned out. But yes, it was definitely a bigger project, and therefore probably as a result more complicated, I suppose. If not more complicated, yes, definitely a bigger project, a little bit harder to take on than Bargain Bin Christmas. Everyone's asking about Spotify, but will this song ever go on Bandcamp? I'm not sure about Bandcamp. The big thing with Bandcamp, the reason that I don't put a lot of stuff on Bandcamp is because they don't have an automatic revenue split system in place. Once they introduce that, if they ever get that in, you better believe everything I've ever made goes on Bandcamp. That is completely my original work. But until then, that's the reason that Middle of Somewhere and various other works of mine are not on Bandcamp, including this song. But again, still working on just seeing if we can get it on Spotify. I got to talk with Scott about that. So, Snoogle Floor, that was your question. Thank you for it. Do you have anything to say about that small saxophone solo? Because it's pretty nice. Yes, Neil. So that is Mark Douthit, who is a legendary sax player here in Nashville. He's been in the business for a very long time. And I knew he could work from home, so I sent him the track, pretty much gave him the breakdown on it, and because Scott had the budget for it, we were able to make it happen. But yeah, Mark Douthit, he's a legend. He's been doing this stuff for a long time. You know, I pretty much just sent it to him, gave him pretty much what approach I wanted to take with it, yeah, you know, it was like, here's the chords, here's my approach, this is the context. There you go. You know, sends it back. I don't have to say anything, you know, throw it in there. I'm like, that's perfect. This is fantastic. He's a pro. He's an absolute pro. Yeah, literally, here's just a list of people he's worked with: Lionel Richie, Elton John, Amy Grant, Billy Joel, Vanessa Williams, Garth Brooks, Michael W. Smith, Toby Keith, Hank Williams Jr., Whitney Houston, Billy Ray Cyrus, Michael McDonald. He's currently touring with Michael McDonald, I'm pretty sure. Well, he was until, you know, this whole COVID debacle happened. But Rascal Flatts, Point of Grace, Brenda Lee, BB and CC. How do you say it? Winans? I've never actually been verbally told. Anyway, yeah, this guy, David Foster, one of the absolute legends. Toto, Tony Braxton. Yeah, this guy ain't kidding around. Michael Amardian, Ben Foltz, there he is, right there. So maybe that's where you're getting the vibes, huh? Stephen Curtis Chapman, Vince Gill, etc., etc. Yeah, no, he's played with pretty much everybody. This guy's a legend. I personally have that connection with him. Great guy. Great guy, sweet guy, and yeah, all I gotta do is send it over to him, gave him the gist of it, and he nailed it. So yeah. So thanks for asking that question, because I love to brag about the players that I get on this, because they were all legends. So, but yeah, now that I've done that, I'm going to answer some questions in the chat, and then we will get to the actual making of the song. So if you guys have any questions in the chat, throw them out there now. Now would be the time, before I move on to the making of the actual talking about the writing process and whatnot. So ask away. How's my day going? It's going great. How much of your family works in the music industry? I do, my sister does, my aunts do, my dad does, and my granddad did until he passed away a couple years ago. So yeah, my aunts don't really work in the industry as much as they used to, but they do. So yeah. What's my favorite part of the song? Oh gosh, I love the chorus and I love the sax solo. I probably it's probably between those two. I love the chorus. Will we ever get a middle of somewhere breakdown? That's a great question. Possibly. Speaking about the Hamilton influence, the drum sound does feel like that. Did you mix and EQ it that way? I did. In fact, the way my dad sent me the track, it had a much fatter and lower end snare. And I told him, I was like, I love that sound, but it's not what I want for this. So I was like, could we change that? And he was like, well, man, I really love my performance on it. I'd love not to have to do another take. And I'm like, that's totally fine. Can I have some drum triggers? So drum triggers essentially are, it's a software, it's a plugin nowadays, but essentially at its core, what it is taking the sample of the sound, the signal from a snare hit or a kick or whatever, usually snare hit, that's the most common one, and changing it with a different sample, switching it out. It doesn't change the performance at all. It just changes the snare tone. Drums are the easiest to adjust the sound on, to tweak it and change it however you want. So the original snare tone was actually quite a bit different. In fact, let me see if I can find a demo of what, and he sent it to me without like any limiting on it or anything. So like he sent it, it's probably clipping a little bit. Yeah, here we go. This is what, and this isn't mixed at all. This was just his, like, here's what it sounds like at the moment, but this is what the inherent drums essentially sounded like. And I like that. I like that sound. But it wasn't what I was going for. I was definitely going for more of a Hamilton, a little bit of a higher end tone to it. You know what I mean? So yeah, hopefully that answers your question. But yes, I was definitely trying to go for more of the Hamilton sound. So I used some drum triggers. I also just did some classic EQ tricks on the original snare, mixed with the drum trigger, to get it to just sound higher and crispier rather than fatter and lower. But yeah, hopefully that answers your question on that. Did you ever release just the instrumental version? Yes. I will probably eventually. How do you feel about working with Scott again? I always love working with Scott. Anytime he calls me up to do something, I'm like, heck yeah, man. Because this is a ton of fun. It's a ton of fun to work with him. Not a question, but I think you're great. I hope you continue to work with Scott. Oh, thanks, Do. Appreciate that. Did you work on the music video at all? Not really, no. That was entirely Scott. He sent me not an early draft. He was cramming to get that done, so he didn't really have a lot of time to adjust anything. But no, I didn't really work on the music video at all. Do I like bacon? Yes, I do. Did you master this yourself? Technically, yes. It was an amateur job, I feel like, but yes, I did master it myself. If we had a little bit more time and a little bit more budget, which I think we did technically have a little bit more budget, but time was our issue. If we had a little more time, I probably would have sent it to my mastering engineer that I usually go to do that kind of stuff. But in this instance, obviously didn't have time. I can do a good enough job by myself, so I did. Did Scott decide the general vibe of the song, or did he leave that to you? It was kind of it kind of was both of us. Like I said earlier, a lot of what it was is that he pretty much called me up to do this, and he was like, I want it to sound like a Disney villain song. In fact, I've got notes when we had the call. I always make notes, when clients talk about, like, this is what I'm thinking. Scott Waugh's Christmas thing 2020. And a lot of this changed. A lot of this actually changed in the final deal. But RPG related, doesn't need to be explicitly Christmas sounding. It's about why Scott isn't an RPG guy. So far, it's essentially the same. Middle of the video, a couple seconds of build up for dialogue leading in. Yep. Let's see, visual in the middle of an exaggerated dream sequence. Like I stated earlier, originally we were planning on making it a dream sequence, but he wanted to change that to a bit of a different scenario. But the song was still written around that dream sequence concept. Tons of people heckling / pressuring Scott. The tone, imagine a villain song in a Disney movie, people trying to get Scott to convert. And then he said fun, R&B-ish, catchy. And I put in parentheses, I'll probably JRPG it up a little, which I definitely did. Duration, 2 minutes. First concept to Scott and then this is just me saying okay, this is what I got to do. This is how I got to get this done. More amplified than Bargain Bin. Yeah, he definitely was he wants to go bigger, and I was all for it. I wanted to make that happen. He originally was thinking of having a reprise at the end. We didn't end up doing that, but that was a concept that we threw out there for a moment. Keep it original, so no explicit. So even though there's that One Winged Angel thing, it's not exactly note for note the same thing, right? We made it where it's obviously one winged, but it's not. You know what I mean? So that was one thing. Like I said, a Final Fantasy reference would be something in the style of the game's music, but not any tune in particular. But yeah, and then I threw out song ideas and whatnot, all of which, didn't necessarily, not all, but a lot of which didn't make it in. I literally sat down and went through a giant playlist of Disney villain songs. I just sat there and watched all of them, played them back, I think 5 times over, went through the playlist 5 times over. So I probably sat there for that was my R&D essentially. I sat there for 3 hours just watching back and forth through Disney villain songs. And then from there, reference some Persona, got some JRPG vibes in there, threw in my own little, style. And then also went and here was another big reference, was literally the E101 beta boss from Sonic Adventure. Reason being, I felt that was a great boss song that really made us feel oh yeah, you're going up against the big guys, but it's fun. You know what I mean? It's fun, it's playful. Another one is Snuff Out the Light from Emperor's New Groove. That was a big reference point, I think, initially. Which is a song that didn't actually make it into Emperor's New Groove, but it's in the soundtrack. I believe it was part of the development hell when they decided to completely flip around the way the whole movie was. But anyway, yeah, those are again some references. I may have kind of gone off topic there, but hopefully that answers quite a few questions on that. Song have a bigger ending to it, or was it always supposed to end abruptly? I had a happier ending, a little bit more of a nicer ending, but you know, when I talk with Scott, I was like, do you want like a kind of an ending that ends on a good note, a bad note, a questionable note, a who knows what happens next note? And we talked about that, and eventually we were like, let's have it end abruptly. So it was actually written, the final writing of it was written to be an abrupt ending. So, anything interesting to do with the part your sister did? Not really. It's incredible, and honestly, I really just want to hear someone else talk about it. I wrote all of the... So I guess the other thing I haven't clarified is I wrote pretty much all the melody. So I sang all the scratch vocals and pretty much was like, okay, this is how it's all going to go melodically. And then we just figured out exactly who sings what, how the lyrics work, etc., etc. Yeah, I essentially just had a scratch vocal. I had Emma come in here. She sat down. Emma is truly a remarkable vocalist. You know, she pretty much came in here. I told her the idea for that. She did one other thing at the end of the song. It was like an opera thing. She did a couple extra stacks for like a backing vocal thing that I'll show you guys in a few minutes. But yeah, for that Grind for Years lyric, just pretty much told her the lyric, told her the idea what the lyric means, because she's not exactly a gamer. It's really funny trying to explain to her these things, but I essentially just gave her the idea of how I want it to be. Couple takes, took like 25 minutes, and that's it. Yeah, she was pretty much in and out of here in under 30 minutes, I want to say. So just want you to know I've been listening in the middle of Somewhere nonstop since it came out. It was one of the things that helped me go through this year. Thank you so much. I'm glad that you enjoyed it so much, Manuel. Appreciate that. Just want to say hello. Been a while since I've chatted. Gotta go. Have a phenomenal time, guys. All right, peace out, Ace. Thanks for coming by. I always wonder how much Scott plans things in advance since he seems to get so much out on time. How early did you know you were making a track for this video? About a month and a half, 2 months. About 2 months, I'd say. 2 months before he released it, I would say. Roughly 2 months. I'm sure I've missed a lot of questions here. I apologize about that. How do I feel about RPGs? Yeah, so there's this common misconception now that since I worked on this song, somehow I'm affiliated with the concept of not liking RPGs. No, I love RPGs. In fact, part of the fun of working on this was making fun of a lot of tropes and things that drive me crazy in RPGs. You know, and I'm not like an RPG guy like a lot of people are, I would say. I'm not a huge fan of them, but I do really like them. You know, some of my favorites... One of my favorite games of all time is Final Fantasy VII. Final Fantasy VII Remake is incredible. I love it. So, yeah, no, I really enjoy RPGs. Have you produced any other songs since the Give Love on Christmas Day by the Katinas? Oh, yeah. I produce a lot of stuff. You know, that's one of my proudest productions I've done in a while. But obviously I produce my own music and whatnot, but I do produce for I mean this right here is me producing for someone else. This track I both wrote and produced for Scott. So I agree that Final Fantasy VII is amazing. It's incredible. It's fantastic soundtrack too. So I don't know if I asked this before, but how do you find the people to record the instruments for you? That, you know, it's a lot of, so I have a family of musicians. That's a starting point. But a lot of it's just connections that I make over time, you know? There's no easy answer to that. It's pretty much just connections I've made over time. But the drums on this were my dad, who's honestly, if you ask me, a pretty legendary session drummer in Nashville. Saxophonist is Mark Douthit, who is a connection I have here in Nashville through my dad. Emma Rose is my sister. Zach is somebody that I met. I honestly, I hope he doesn't like feel bad about this, but I don't remember how I met him. I don't remember how I meet most people I meet. So, but I know it probably had to do with our love for Sonic. I'm sure that had to do with it. I'm also sure it had to do with the fact that we both actually live in Nashville. Nashville bros. So yeah. Yeah. And then Chase Akers, it was actually, again, through family. My dad's connection my dad had, his son is Chase Akers, who happened to be a very good guitar player. So So yeah. Is any form of reposting this song with credit on other websites allowed? No, not really. The only thing that's allowed is if you use it in like a video, but essentially the fair use deal. You know, if you use it in a video or in a stream, and so long as you credit me, that's perfectly fine. But yeah, there's your answer. My dream is to be a musician one day. Any tips? Start now. Find any there. It's so easy to start. You know, you could literally start with GarageBand on your iPhone. You know, it's very easy to start. The best advice I can give is to just start doing. The best way to learn is just to start doing and make it happen. You know, commitment and passion for it. You know, I would say that's honestly the best advice I could give somebody. You said the song sound was inspired by Persona. What song from which Persona game had the most influence on it? Oh, nothing in particular, if I'm honest. Probably, if I really don't know Persona's soundtrack that well. A lot of it was just going through stuff that I had heard before. I don't even really remember a lot of the songs or the song names. There's the one classic, da da. That's all I remember. I'm sure you guys know that was an influence. A lot of, but boy, it's very vague. Like it was definitely an influence on the sound, but I don't explicitly recall, or even I didn't even explicitly try to take from any song particularly, I guess is the best way to say it. So you never, yeah, that's the one, Silver Tom. Is it called Mass Destruction? Is that it? I don't know. It's Last Surprise. Yeah, I don't know. It's the one, Silver Tom. I'm pretty sure that's the lyric from it. So yeah, I don't know the names of any of the songs. I'd have to listen to them. But yeah, Persona, that would be my answer there. Any other questions? We're 45 minutes in. I think we should probably get to the next part of this at this point. Was it fun working with Donkey? Oh, I had no clue he was going to be in the video until I watched it. So, I mean, it was pretty cool. It was pretty cool, but I had no clue he was going to be in it. Will this be on Spotify? Yeah, I keep getting that question answered. Yeah, I can't tell you. I can't tell you yet. I got to talk with Scott about it. But I'm glad there's so many questions about it, so I will speak with Scott about it. What do you think is the best produced video game soundtrack? I think Sonic Unleashed is one of the best out there. That one's definitely top notch. Boy, that's hard to answer. Sonic Unleashed is the first one that comes to my brain, if I'm honest. Unleashed is the first one that comes to my head. I was wondering if Scott originally wanted to get session player. It was just a matter of what sound he was going for. So I decided to get session players based on the sound he was going for. You know what I mean? So he had a certain sound. We talked about it, and I told him, okay, I have an idea. This was my idea. He's like, that's a great idea. Okay, could I get some players on this? Because that would be best for this kind of sound. Yeah, absolutely, man. And so that was it. So it wasn't like explicitly like, oh, we should do a song with session players. It's just whatever the music calls for. You know, it's whatever the music calls for. I'm just that's the best way to put it. So do you mind if we ask questions not relating to the song? Right now I'm focusing on the song. So any questions about anything else? I'd love to eventually do just an overall Q&A. But for now, we're primarily focusing on the song. Thanks for asking, though. So yeah, did you ever meet Scott personally? Like in person? In the flesh? No, I actually haven't been able to meet him in the flesh yet. No, the closest we've gotten is video calls. So Yeah. Kind of irrelevant, but did you guys plan this online or did you meet up? Yeah, I mean, I think that goes back to your boy Draw's question. We haven't met up in person. So, yeah. Do you think we could look forward to more songs with Scott like this? Yes, I think you can. Will you go through your mixing and mastering process when doing the breakdown? Yes, I absolutely will be. That'll be the last thing I do, so stick around. If you're one of the nerds, if you're one of the tech guys that really wants to see that stuff, stick around till the end, because I'll get into that. But I'm backloading. I'm putting that in the back, because obviously I'm not sure everybody's super interested in the super technical side of things. Forgot if this was said, but did you have a lot of video calls then? Were they very long? We usually have 1 to 2, like 45-ish to an hour long, maybe tops, video calls, just to get everything out of the way. And then from there, most of it is just messaging back and forth. Because at that point, we have the general idea of what we want to do. We know what we're going for. After that, it's pretty much all messaging back and forth. So, yeah, anyway. Okay. So, I've already answered a lot of the questions regarding how this song, how the process, and all that jazz. Like I already showed, the Disney villain influence was very prominent for sure. Lost my train of thought. Yeah, the Disney villain idea, that was definitely a big starting point for me, and then the Persona sound, and then another huge influence was Hamilton, and I know I've briefly mentioned it already, but there's only been a handful of questions about Hamilton, but yeah, there was a lot of Hamilton, particularly not the My Shot song, because a big part of the track that I heavily referenced Hamilton was the stops, the pushes in the second half of the rap verse.
Okay. Turn bass pedals in.
Not right there. A little bit further.
Up when I missed one thing and now I'm lost.
Right here.
That 1 inch of text really meant a lot. There's some shop with items I can't.
That whole idea came from the whole like My Shot thing, the bam, 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 that whole thing where it's like just those hits and there's nothing else except for the rap vocals. So that's where I got that idea from. The whole mix in general was very influenced by Hamilton. I definitely wanted to go with kind of that Disney Broadway kind of sound. So that was very prominent. But yeah, that was the Hamilton thing was pretty much across the whole track. But yeah, I pretty much started. I'll go ahead and show you guys. Hopefully I don't give any more personal information away that I'm gonna need to fix and post. Yeah, I'll just go ahead and show you literally the first. Here's the first concept. So this pretty much gives you gives you your answer on probably what came to me first, and I guess it was probably the turnaround into the rap part, and then I figured out the first verse and the chorus. And obviously, I already was pretty like that. I kept the exact same piano, the strings, and all that stayed exactly the same here. Right, so this is all fake at this point. Like, obviously, I keep the keys and whatnot, but like, the drums are MIDI. Right, so already like this is the first work in progress, and I've already got. yeah, that whole idea is pretty much already there. You know, just with my program demo drums. Here's the full concept. Oh yeah, I had, and I got rid of it, but you'll hear there's a and that came initially, I got rid of it because I decided it was just completely unnecessary, but I actually got that idea from Pink Elephants, from Walt Disney's Dumbo. There's this little organ in there that goes, and so I took that, but I ultimately decided, I think it takes away from the track, so I got rid of it. Right? So again, the bass idea is already there. Everything, there's no guitar, no string programming, no real drums. And we also, so this was also Scott's idea. When he does the whole, oh thank God, he was like, hey, what if we ramped it up and then it just cut off and left space for oh thank God. So that was his idea actually. Because originally I had that weird chord progression in there.
Why don't you play it?
Yeah, there's my crappy, it was like late at night, I had to be super quiet, so I real quick recorded the scratch vocals very quietly. And this was before, the other thing is he wanted to implement in a little no. And so I gave it an extra 2-beat bar for that little pause before it goes into the why don't you play it. And originally I said why don't you play it, but Scott wanted to change it to why don't you play them.
Why don't you play it? Really guys, it's just because it's not my style.
That's the other thing. My original idea was I wanted him to kind of talk it back to them. Guys, I just don't want to do this, you know? But he was like, you know, I kind of want to do something a little bit more melodic there. I was like, all right. Which was fantastic because then once I actually started writing about that, you know, because Scott even has made it clear, he's like, listen, I'm no musical guy. So it actually was a great challenge for me because I thought, how can I write a song, how can I write a melody that is super easily singable for people that aren't singers? You know, not tone deaf, but just aren't singers. You know what I mean? And that was the big challenge, and I'm honestly happy with the melody because it's so bare bones simple, but still I think hopefully pretty catchy, you know. But I just ended up deciding to make the melody as simple as possible. That's it. They just take so damn long to complete. That's it. That's all it is. You know, and obviously it does something a little bit different the second time around, etc., etc. But I really was, my goal when he was like, I want to do something melodic, is I was like, okay, let me try and write something that's really like kindergarten simple, but still really catching, people love it. And that's actually the same approach, fun fact, that Nirvana, that Kurt Cobain claimed that he made when working on Nevermind. He wanted to write songs that he felt were pretty much kindergarten level of melodies, but brilliantly catchy at the same time, you know. So hopefully
Why don't you play it? Why don't you guys go and fight over something?
Hopefully you guys felt that way about it.
Something worthwhile. Why don't you play it?
Yeah, so things changed a little bit there, but the melody generally stayed the same. You know, turn around. Okay, so if you guys want a more legitimate ending, here's the original ending before we decided to change it to something more abrupt. Because the original ending was just, it ended on too much of a good note. It just ended too nicely, and that's not how Scott wrote this. He didn't want the video to, basically he just didn't want the song to end on a certain note that didn't work with the video, obviously. So here's your original version. So the saxophone solo would be right here, right? Caught up again. So that was the original ending, but we decided too good of a note. I'm sure some people are like, oh man, I want to hear that ending, etc., but that is not how he wrote it. So ultimately, so yeah, and then there was a ton of other stuff in here, but that was essentially the compositional. That's how we went around composing it. So then, first thing that got taken care of was the drums. I sent the track to my dad. He got drums on it, which, you know, you can hear here. I'll go ahead and solo them for you. Ha! System overload, and I'm at 1024 buffer. Lord of mercy. Anyway, so there's that 32 gigabytes of RAM, ladies and gentlemen. 32 gigs. Yeah. So, you know, there's that. There's this whole... And I'll get into more of the technical stuff later, but this is essentially drums. Here's all the drum tracks. You know, got your kick, snare top, snare bottom, snare sample. That's that drum trigger I was mentioning earlier. Hat, tom 1, tom 2, overheads, and room track. My favorite part, probably, for the drums, though, has got to be this. Fantastic. Those are actual drums? Yeah, that's my dad, bro. That is my dad. No correction. There is no beat detecting. My dad plays like that. When I say my dad is a iconic session drummer, I'm not just bragging because he's my dad. I'm bragging because I'm damn right. Thank you. So there's your drums. The next thing after that is the bass was programmed. The bass, I wanted to get a real bassist, and I totally could have, but we ran out of time. And I was like, you know what? The bass, admittedly, is the first thing that I would axe in terms of real players. I always want a real bassist, but I can fake it if I have to. I hate saying that because I would rather get a real bassist, but we ran out of time. I was like, all right, then we're just gonna keep bass. So the bass was programmed. I mean, I played it, but yeah. Obviously, I recorded keys all first because that was all part of the demo. None of that changed. So you know, you got all your keys here. I played all of this. So you got your piano keyscape, legendary plugin. And that was another thing, the chord progression and the chorus. I originally wrote it, if I remember correctly, it was like, it was something like that. Right? Or maybe it was like, it may have been that. Something like that, but one way or another, I felt like that is too pretty. It needs a little bit more spunk. It needs to feel a little bit almost like there's a strange, funky intimidation about it, right? So I changed that final chord to instead of being something like that, I went, and all that is a mod up from, so that's a 13, that's a, I suppose you could say an F sharp 13, to in A 13, right? But it's got a little bit of spunk to it, right? And I think that helped it sound a little bit more like, I don't know, it gives a little bit more of a vibe. I don't really know the best way to put it other than a little spunky, a little, you know, maybe even a little villainous, a little bit more nasty, if you will. So yeah, you got the piano. I have this wah clav. Right, so I played that, and then you've got your electric piano. All keyscape, ladies and gentlemen. Keyscape is beautiful. It's beautiful. So yeah. You got all that. And then obviously Glock. There's a Glock in here, Glockenspiel. Also keyscape. So yeah, I did all those keys first, and then the drums, like I showed. And then right after the drums, I had Chase Akers come over and throw down some guitars. And for all you techies out there, guitar players, yikes, need to turn this off. It's clearly picking up my voice, LOL. For all you guitar guys out there, he played a telly, and we actually did everything in the box. So DI box into the audio interface, all amps, all everything inside of the computer. We did that actually with most of Middle of Somewhere as well. I like to mic up an amp. That's my favorite way to go, but it doesn't work out as often as I'd like it to, and it's honestly still fine, because honestly, Logic's amps are pretty freaking good. So he used a Crybaby wah pedal, as I'm sure you guitar people probably know about. And then the freaking, he's almost out of tune with one of these, but it ended up, I think, adding character to it. My favorite part probably with his guitars, or at least one of my favorite parts, has got to be this soft section before the chorus, the pre-chorus. I'm gonna mute all the vocals, so I want you guys to listen to this. I love this. Oh, I love that. This is so good. That was so, man, we were so happy with that. Yeah. Great little part there. And that was last minute. We were pretty much done, and we were like, I was like, hold on, I got one more idea, right? So then we accented this thing, right? With the guitar, but then he was like, yo, what if it was just a constant back and forth. So after that, he was like, what if I responded to it with this thing, which he did. And then I was like, okay, I've got a final idea. What if you have a little wah thing that does this echo ping pong effect back and forth there? Super sexy. Too sexy for Virgin Scott. Am I playing into lore well? Did I do a good funny? Was that funny? So that was fantastic. I loved doing that. We love working on that. So yeah, Chase is fantastic. And then of course my other favorite part, I mean, he's got tons of great parts, but here so there's obviously So actually that is actually a sample from Logic. I'm not even going to try and act like that was Chase. He could have done it, but I already had it in there from the beginning, and so I just held on to it. But yeah, there's that, you've got... I loved that. That aren't this stupid. It's still in there. So yeah, but probably my other big favorite part is with the guitars is this whole thing. He came up with the initial funk riff idea here. he came up with that, and then I had an idea to have a response to it. So he played that out. You know, we pretty much just play through the track for like a split, like loop it a few times just so he gets a feel, and then we find it. We're like, that's it, that's the groove. So then we find that, we record it, and then I was like, what if we had that in left ear, and then in right ear we had a response to it that goes like this. So that was fun. I'm very happy with that. You know, if I were to, you know, very sinfully mute the sax here for a second so you can hear it better.
Why don't you play it so good?
Yeah, so there you go. So yeah, guitars were next, and then I had a ton of scratch vocals, as you already pretty much heard, like most of them. I had a ton of scratch vocals, but we started getting vocals out of the way. You know, Scott pretty much just sent me various takes of everything, and then I just spliced it all together to try and get it into a good rhythm. Yeah, that's pretty much that. People have asked about auto-tune with Scott. Not really, actually. I did a little bit of flex pitch. You know, there are a couple notes that he was, you know, flat or sharp on, so I just adjust those, but I didn't want it to sound perfect, you know? I don't want him to sound like, because it's also kind of comedic, and I don't think he wants to sound perfect. That would sound awful, honestly. So, you know, we intentionally left a lot of the kind of pitchiness in his vocal in there. But I did correct a couple of spots just to address that white elephant in the room. But yeah. And then obviously I had Emma come over following all of that, and I had her record her vocal parts, you know, which weren't many, but
you could grind for years just to beat that bossa.
Yeah. The fantastic thing is when Zach sent me his stuff, he also, because I gave him like the vocals that I needed him to record, but he ended up having so much fun with it. He threw a bunch of extra stuff on there, which I thought was awesome, because he ended up actually doing his own take of, but you could grind for years. He did that whole thing, which I wanted to keep Emma's lead vocal, but he harmonized to it, which I didn't even call for. I didn't ask for that. He harmonized to it, and his performance matched up nearly perfectly with Emma. In fact, it did. It matched up perfectly with Emma's. And so you've got this fantastic... I was so happy. I was like, man, this is perfect.
But you could grind for years just to beat that bossa.
It was fantastic, you know? So then you combine all...
But you could grind for years just to beat that bossa.
Yeah, so that's that. They both did a terrific job. But yeah, and I already answered most of the questions about Scott and his lyrics. He pretty much wrote all of it. He was like, let me know what you think. I made a few adjustments here and there. I remember both of us, I was like, I'm not particularly into the not having sex line. I knew that was a joke with him, but I also was like, you know what? It's a joke with him, so I need to leave it alone. You know what I mean? That was like one of those. I was like, I think that's one of his things. So we kept that, you know, for the sake of it being a Scott gag. Because I originally I was like, what if we did this? And I was like, maybe this is too AVGN, but I'm pretty sure it was like turn-based battles in too many words. I'd rather go out and eat my dog's turds. And Scott was like, that is the most AVGN thing. Yeah, we didn't do that. But there were some other lyrics that I wanted to change here and there. I won't go into all the specifics of that, but generally almost all of the lyrics that like Scott sings or performs, for the most part, he wrote. You know, I've already kind of clarified again that like I wrote the "but you could grind for years" part when we were doing the Q&A. And, you know, I wrote all the lyrics at the back half with like, they're so good though, listen guys, you can't have opinions, all that kind of crap. The back and forth, I wrote all of that on a whim, but they just ended up working. Yeah. That's pretty much that for how the vocals went. Let you guys kind of hear some of the vocals by themselves. Zach did a fantastic job. He is a lot of that. You know, I kind of did the lower parts there. Right. And I mixed these vocals differently than normal. Most of the time I just do straight LR, but I decided I wanted to kind of mix it almost like it was a string setup, where you've got the lower end on the left and the higher end on the right. So Emma's on the highest registers, right? So she's mostly in the right ear. Right? And then Zach is kind of in the middle-ish. He's the width and he's the middle. Right? So it was a mixture between all of those. Right? He also... let me go ahead, because there were some questions about the crowd vocals and what Tracy did. So here's the crowd and Zach.
Why don't you play them?
Right? You've heard it a million times. Let me go ahead and show you how that was done, right? So we've got this stuff I just recorded.
Why don't you play them?
Right? That's my parts. And then there's Tracy doing her thing.
Why don't you play them?
It's just a whole bunch of random, like, funny sounding voices. So that's all Tracy right there, just doing random different vocals. And then stacked on top of that is Zach.
Why don't you play them?
Right? So you've got what I call the Winnie the Pooh crowd. It's got a very kind of Winnie the Pooh sound to it. But yeah, that's how...
Why don't you play them?
They just take so damn long to complete.
Why don't you play them?
60 hours just to rinse.
Yeah, so there you go. That's the vocals there. You've got the vocals here as well. Go ahead and solo these so you get a good idea of how these sound.
Why don't you play them?
They're so good though.
You can't have opinions.
Why don't you play them?
Start a new file.
Oh, well, I'm missing Scott. Yeah, I had a little opera thing for Emma you may have heard in there. Just very funny. You know, just like, oh, the humanity, oh. That was kind of what I was going for. It's just this stupid, like, oh, you're not an RPG guy. That was pretty much, that was my intention, was just chaos and just, how could you? So, yeah, it was...
Why don't you play them?
They're so good though. Listen, guys.
You can't have opinions.
Why don't you play them?
They're not my style.
Start a new file. Why don't you?
Yeah. So, yeah, I obviously, as you can probably tell just by the tone, I did the you can't have opinions part, and I also did the start a new file part.
Not my style.
Start a new file. Why don't you?
Yeah, so that was fun. I love the way you hit opinions. Oh man, I get super into it, right? So like, I'm like standing up and I'm just like, you can't have opinion. Like I'm getting really into it when I sing it, right? Because it's got to have all that Broadway overacting sound to it. So I had tons of fun with that. And then after all that, I had already kind of figured out most of the string arrangement. Obviously, we had a huge budget. I would have recorded real strings, but we don't have a giant budget. But I was able to get away with, I think, fairly passable strings. And yeah, I arranged and programmed them. They are primarily cinematic studio strings. Fantastic library. I can get, again, more into the details of exactly how I got the sound in a bit. But, yeah. So you've got all that, and then you got, you know... Yeah. So yeah, very, you know, obviously keeping it simple. And then yeah. Was that intended to sound like One Winged Angel? Yes. So, okay, I want to talk about this real quick. This part, this is my favorite part of the whole string thing. It was the first thing I came up with. Is this chromatic.
Don't you play them?
But yeah, it is. It's all MIDI. So the big thing with programming that and arranging that was I was totally thinking, and I always am, Michael Jackson's Off the Wall is 100% a subconscious influence in here. There's no doubt about it. This string part is 100% inspired by Don't Stop Till You Get Enough. Now I'm not going to play it for content ID sake, but there is a legendary moment. You can hear it at pretty much nearly the beginning of the song once the whole beat drops, and it's that string part. You know, it's one of my favorite string arrangements ever, honestly. So that was step one, right? And then it kind of just kept going, right? So it was an influence between that and two other songs, very recent songs. One of them is Tori Kelly. She did a song like about a year or two ago called Until Forever. It's on the deluxe version of, I think it was about a year ago. Fantastic track. And it's totally got a part in the turnaround of the song that does that same chromatic thing. Till forever. It does something like that. And I love that little chromatic movement. I thought was fantastic. And then Ariana Grande released her most recent record, and there's a song off there. What's the name of it? I'm not gonna play it again because I really don't want to get in content ID trouble. Love Language. Always with the chromatic stuff. So that was all of that combined was how I came up with this whole string arrangement part right here, where it just goes.
Don't you play them? Turn bass.
Yeah, so lots of fun. The one thing, and you'll notice the tone is different, but I've got like this string stab, this disco string thing that I throw in there. That is not, it's a cinematic studio strings can't do that, so that's actually from Logic's session strings. So I combine both. Yeah. 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 A lot of people like this part, so thought I'd show it to you guys. So anyway, only 300 seconds? Can you just ban them forever? Will the stream be archived? Yes. I gotta make sure that none of my personal information is showing, because I guess that accidentally happened. But yeah, it will be. So yeah, and then obviously this final part here. Yeah. So, oh, and let's not forget, this was always in there from the start. My dad actually drummed to it, but I had these percussion loops, right? So that really kind of gives it part of that like disco flair, is having something like that. That kind of even Persona-ish flair, maybe. I don't know. Anyway, yeah, so fun stuff. Yeah, and then I guess just for you guys, like I said, I programmed the bass. This is one of the first things I did, but oh, you know, someone actually asked me, and I totally forgot to answer. Somebody asked what bass I was using for this. Well, I released stems. Probably not. Somebody was asking me about the bass, and it is a Scarby pre-bass. It's actually not very expensive, like 40 bucks maybe for it. Pretty cheap sample library, but sounds fantastic. And then what I do is I throw a Logic bass amp on it. Again, we're getting into the technical side of things, but just so you know how I got the sound. Bass amp. I've got this Blue Cat Chorus. This is free. And I never have used this one before, actually. This was the first time. I just needed something to give it a little bit more stereo flair. And then console EQ, which I love the way console EQ colors bass. I talk about this a lot. I use it religiously on bass, but I love console EQ. Console EQ is Logic's emulation of the Neve 1073. Again, we're getting into technical stuff, but I'll be getting to that soon anyway. Compressor, tape emulation, all that jazz, and you get this sound. Do I have a version with the more happy ending to the song? Only that demo. Well, okay, so technically I do have that happy ending. Well, I probably hid all of it. Look, here's all my hidden tracks. And a lot of these are meshed together. I do have it, but it's the exact same as what you heard earlier. We didn't record any of that with my dad didn't record any of those drums. Chase didn't record any of the guitar for that. So the only actual happy ending is the demo, essentially the demo stuff. So yeah. So that is that's that. Oh wait, no, it's not that. I always forget something, right? There's the saxophone, which, yeah, I already told you guys. Mark Douthit, I contacted him. I was like, hey, could you work with a fast turnaround? We're on a tight schedule. He's like, absolutely. I can work from home if that's okay. Yeah, that's totally okay. So I send him the track. I say, here's the chords of this part. This is the context of the whole song. This is why the song is this way. This is kind of what I'm going for. This is the feel and the approach I want with the saxophone. That's that. I was like, need anything else? Nope, I'm good. A couple days later, sends me back. This is it. This is like first take. Probably not first take. I don't know like how much he produced himself, but yeah, he sent this to me and I didn't have to say anything. I was like, this sounds fantastic. That's all I needed. Thank you so much. You rock. And there you go. That's the saxophone. Big shout outs to Mark. Incredible player. Is there a way in which you determine what BPM you want for a song? I just feel it out. Yeah, I just come up with it and then I figure out the BPM. Yeah, always. I'll just get a feel for it. I'll be like, I'll almost always like, so, probably the first thing is, I think the first thing I came up with was probably the... Right? So I just played it like that and I was like, okay, I'm getting a feel for how I want to play it, right? Right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Right. So then I'm just like, okay, all right, okay, that's boom, So I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna put in that tap tempo it, and then figure out the tempo from there. But I always just let my fingers just kind of do its thing, figure out exactly where I want that beat to land, and then I figure out the tempo afterward. So, reminds me of the sax for Big Blue in Mario Kart 8. That's a good solo. That's a good one. What's the chord progression on Grind for Years part? That is a great question. I don't even remember. Let's figure out right now, shall we? Like I said, this was one of those songs, because people are asking, like, what was the first part that you remember figuring out? And the answer was I didn't know. Because this is one of those, some songs have a little bit more of a vivid, like, yeah, I know exactly what I did, how I started it. This is one of those that just kind of like came to me. Like, here's the inspiration, here's a reference, okay, we're just gonna take that all in, and then, okay, and then, blah, you know? I'm like practically drunk working on it. It's my way of, it's like, me writing it, I'm like borderline stoned. I'm not. I don't even smoke pot, but like, it seems that way because crap just hits me, and then I don't remember how I got there. And that's not, like I said, that's not every time, but this is one of those instances in which I would say, yes, this is one of those instances where it was like, kind of just hit me, and I have no clue how I got there. Which key is the track? That is a very hard question for me ever to answer. Okay, let's see if I can remember what I did here. So I modded up. So it was an A13 up to a C, up another mod. So it goes. That's literally what I'm doing. I'm just modding up. That's a diminished. And then I think I go to, what is that chord there? What is that chord? Oh man. It's like a, that's it. It's a minor 7 add 6. Yeah, add 6 at the top. That's a very typical chord for me. So what that is, I'm moving fourths there. B minor 7 add 6 to an E 7. Essentially, I'm keeping this G sharp in the top here. So. And then A major 7 add 9, or add 2, whichever you want. And then I go, that's it. So yeah, it's all chromatic from here. It's all downhill from here, quite literally. So, down chromatically to, so that was A major 7 add 9, G sharp or A flat, whatever the frick, minor 7, G natural 13, finally lands on G flat, F sharp, whatever the frick, minor 7 add 9. And then it goes up to the tritone sub. Oh, and I'm blowing it. That's it. Playing the wrong chord. So it goes tritone sub up to the C. C major 7 add 9. And the bass line voice leading is very important for me. Back to another, not quite a tritone, but what is that, a flat 6 or whatever the frick? Yeah. right? So, and that's a sharp 9. That's a stanky chord. Stanky chord. So yeah, it goes again to recap on that part. And there you go. That's that whole part for you. Tritone subs. Modding and tritone subs, you'll get real jazzy real fast with those. Just a some quick advice for you. Tritone subs and modding. But and not video game modding. I mean literally you could like a big thing with like Neo Soul, for instance, is like moving between if not Neo Soul, just like a lot of JRPGs, honestly, just moving same kind of chord, literally the same exact chord, but moving between different notes, right? So modding up, right? You can already write like a song like that's all the same chord. It sounds super jazzy, but it's literally the same chord and I'm just moving up, right? That's all just minor 9s. That's all it is. But it sounds really cool. You know? How much jazz training do you have? No formal training. All by ear. So no formal training. But I've learned a lot. I didn't even mean to play. Anyway, so hopefully that answers that question. That is definitely one of my favorite parts of the song. So I'm glad you asked. I like that part. It's that little pretty. I love writing something where there's like an established like. So like here it's like this established, almost villainous but still fun, stanky, spunky chord progression here. But then in the second half we have this response to it with a more pretty part, right? Which is where Emma's vocals come in. Right? And now let's come back around. And now we're back to spunk. Right? It's like we have a little detour for a second, get a nice view of the glorious sunset or whatever, and back to the interstate. You know what I mean? So that's kind of that's often kind of my approach. Grande's been real quiet since this drop. Where you at, Grande? I'll produce your next track. So yeah. If you guys have any other questions about that kind of stuff, I love answering that because I can't think of everything immediately, but I love talking about that kind of stuff. So let me know. Yeah. So. Yeah, when I was trying to go for the Persona-ish, just the funk and kind of the Hamilton even sound, I definitely knew some of my primary instrumental choices, which they often are anyway. But you know, your piano, your electric piano, and your clavinet, and it's just a matter of fitting them in there so that they all have their part. They all play a different role. They have a different tone. Let them take the space they need to, right? So the electric piano goes, right? It's not playing the whole thing. It's just kind of playing some of those chords, giving the kind of that funky, right? All that stuff. And then you got the piano, which is holding most of it together, right? And then you got this extra top end kind of funk on top with the clav. Giving some extra funk. And then of course we get, the other stuff in there, bass. And then of course You can't have funk without the funk guitar. That's so important. Glockenspiel. That's that very Disney. I honestly consider this kind of the Disney section of this part of the song, the chorus. With Emma's vocals and everything, I consider this kind of the Disney sidetrack, if you will, for a second. Might be a little jazzy for Disney, but regardless, and then obviously your drums. Right, and then of course the strings. And then the vocals.
Repeats.
But you could grind for years just to beat that bus.
Why waste all this time on just one game? Why don't you play them?
And there you go. So yeah. So there's that. Appreciate you guys tuning in for all of that. I'm now going to get to the more technical heebie-jeebies. If you're interested in the technical heebie-jeebies, then stick around. And if you have questions about this stuff, please do ask, because I love nerding out over this kind of stuff. But yeah, that's essentially the compositional side, how we got there. You know, again, the production, how I produced Scott, you know, like I said, I would have him kind of, for the most part, most of his first track that he sent numerous takes on, and I just picked out takes, and I thought most of it was good, but there were a couple things where I was like, hey, let's do that again, you know, let's try something different, let's try a different delivery here, but yeah, that was for the most part it, and all the players and singers did a fantastic job. They made my life very easy, so big shout outs to them, because they are incredible, very talented individuals. But yeah, so now to get to the more technical side here, in terms of mixing it, right? So let's just imagine I've now finished working on the track. I pretty much kind of already start mixing from day one, right? I already am gain staging or whatever they say. I'm getting everything at the levels I want them from the minute I start recording. I already have the tone I want down. Mixing then is just once I get it's the glue. It's me finally getting everything how I want it, sitting in the right space, all that kind of jazz. Peace out, Manuel. But yeah, so with the piano, a big thing that I use a lot, regardless, is tape emulation. A big thing I use on this track for a bit of cleaner sounds while still having a little bit more of that analog-ish feel is the SSL E channel from Waves. I love this EQ and compressor. It's a great. It's also a noise gate. It's great at all of them. I use that a lot. So yeah, a lot of that going on. Again, I mix this a lot more simply than a lot of other songs. I don't mix like super fancy, if you will, for the most part, but this one I definitely kept more simple because I wanted it to have that clean kind of sound. I heavily referenced Hamilton on this, again, especially My Shot. The big influence both on the composition, the production, and the mixing. So yeah. Again, using Keyscape for the piano here. I religiously use Keyscape as well. Like I said, I'm using the SSL E channel here. What I like to do is I cut out a lot of the low end here. I'm cutting out all the way up to 187 hertz or whatever the frick, because I want to leave that space for lower end stuff, you know, like the bass and the drums. I don't want to muddy that up. So I cut out a lot of that. You know, I brighten up the top end. We're at about 8 kilohertz here, 8,000 hertz, whatever the frick. I've turned that up 4 decibels. I don't tend to, unless the sound I really need to mess with it, I try not to exceed like 3 to 4 decibels of tweaking an EQ, but that doesn't always happen. Obviously, there's always exceptions. There's no rules. Another big area that I love to turn up for piano is roughly around the 900 to 1100 hertz range in the frequency, because it just brings out a certain little mid-range that the piano just really grabs really well, and often other instruments don't sound as great with that little frequency area there. So I'll often dip that frequency in numerous other instruments, especially the vocals, and let the piano hold that spot, so that it kind of stands out. What else do I got going on here? I'm turning up just a hair of the mid-low to grab the chords. The chords are generally, you'll generally find chords sit somewhere between 300 and 550, 600 hertz-ish. So I'll have like a wide bell on that, just turning it up just a little bit down there. And then I almost always flip on this analog switch here just to get the original emulation of the analog hardware. No compression really, though, because most of the compression on the piano is from either this compressor right here or from the actual compressor inside of the plugin. Now, as you can see, I've baked the plugin, so I bounce it down. It's not the MIDI, because again, that takes up so much power. But yeah. So let me just show you. Here's the compressor. Vintage FET. This is a Logic compressor. Really, really nice compressor. I liked its tone the best for this. Again, I'm really not even compressing that much. That's going, what, maybe negative 2 decibels tops. I don't, again, a lot of the compression already is coming from the piano plugin itself, so I don't want to do too much after the fact. I've got a little extra channel EQ here just because I guess I wanted to adjust a couple things. Just some, bow on the top. And then my tape emulator. Have it at 15 IPS at +5 bias, all that jazz. Won't get into all that jazz, but essentially I wanted the tape sound without compromising the top end too much, so I didn't want to do 7.5, which is slower. IPS meaning how quickly the reel is, moving. The slower it is, the less low end you get, but the warmer it is and the more low end you get. Well, obviously it's the piano. I don't really want the low end as much. I want that higher end. So yeah. So let me go ahead and show you what it sounds like without any of that on. Right? This is with, and we're going to go step by step. Here's SSL. Compressor. Handle EQ. Tape EQ. Not tape EQ, but tape emulation. Anyway, what does tape emulator do? So it emulates the sound of the OG analog machines, because you may not know exactly how this all used to happen, but obviously we didn't always record music on computers. So what did we do before that? We recorded directly to analog tape, and what they called reel-to-reel, REEL to REEL, and you can look up a lot on it. Actually, a lot of older video game tracks were recorded analog. And I don't mean like SNES, not like the MIDI chiptune stuff. I mean, once they started actually being able to stream pre-recorded music, like say Sonic Adventure or Smash Melee, something like that. At that point, though, computers still weren't quite powerful enough, so especially with Sonic Adventure, to really easily record all of that on computer hardware. So what did they do? They actually recorded a lot of Sonic Adventure soundtrack on analog tape and then transferred it over digitally. So yeah, but essentially tape just has its own, it's got a very nice warm tone to it, and it just sounds fantastic. Digital often can sound almost too crisp and clean and doesn't have enough personality, character, humanity even to it, if you will. And so in the past few years, people have done a really great job of actually being able to emulate the sound of tape for computers. And the J37 from Waves is a pretty good one. There's another one I use from Slate. It's literally just called Virtual Tape Machine. That one's pretty solid as well. But yeah, so I use it quite a bit over this track, and just in general I do. On the clavinet, I've got a console EQ. I love this because it's an emulation of the Neve 1073, which is a analog piece of hardware. It was a preamp / EQ that was used a lot. It's got a great tone to it. I love it on a lot of different things. Usually I love to use it on bass, but I also think it's got a great tone for stuff like the clavinet. I'm going to go ahead and go to a spot that maybe has something a little bit more interesting. Really all I'm doing here though is I'm turning a little bit of the high mid-range here, 3.2 kilohertz, just a little bit, but I'm largely just taking out low frequencies here up to 160 hertz. But a lot of the reason that I even throw the console EQ on there is simply for the color. It just has a certain sound to it that I really like, that it adds. It's always very subtle, you know. I'm not very interested. Not that I'm not very interested. A lot of the time, it's not exactly trying to. I'm not trying to do anything that's going to be night and day differences, but things that are just going to kind of make things feel better. At the end of the day, I think what's most important is how it feels. Once again, tape emulation on this one as well, 15 IPS, all that jazz. But yeah, I don't even know why the channel EQ is there because I'm not using it. So this is without that console EQ on or tape emulation. We'll turn off both. Console EQ on. That's what the tape emulation on. And what the tape emulation is primarily doing there, in the same way as the console EQ, is essentially, because of their analog hardware, they have what we call harmonic distortion, which is actually distortion that's nice, essentially. It just sounds a lot, it's more melodic. It's more, like they say, harmonic distortion. It's not like gross digital distortion or something like that where it's clipping in a way that just sounds absolutely ugly. It actually can help give color and excitement and interest to the sound. And so that's essentially what I'm using it for, is to get a little bit more of that interesting harmonic distortion out of it. In the same way, I'm doing the same thing with the electric piano here. Console EQ on it. I love this console EQ. Turning up a little bit of the 800-ish kilohertz range. Or not 800, 800 hertz range, excuse me. Almost up a decibel. This is just a spot right under the piano that I like. It's not right where the piano is, but it's a tone just under it. That's kind of, it's a nice spot where the electric piano sits. Cutting out quite a bit of low end from this as well, because again, I don't want to muddy up that low end. And then again, I've got that tape emulation on it, and I'm turning up the saturation or the distortion essentially. So that you get a little bit of that harmonic distortion. So this is without any of that. Here's with it on. You just got a little bit of that warm distortion in there. I really like the tone of that. I've got this one at 7.5 IPS because I'm not as interested in having the top end. I'm a little bit more interested in the warmer side of the electric piano. This isn't necessarily about why don't you play them, but when you listen to music for video games like Sonic Adventure, or more specifically Melee, is it hard to tell what is digital or orchestrated? Actually, I was pretty shocked when I finally, because I remember like about a month or two ago, I actually started digging deep to figure out exactly how they recorded Sonic Adventure, because I thought, wait, this makes no sense. There's no way that they had the computer power in 1998 to record a lot of the stuff that they did for that. And I was right. They recorded a lot of that on analog tape. But it was so clean. A lot of it was so digital sounding anyway that I was actually kind of shocked that it was analog. Part of me wonders if some of it was analog and they combined it with some digital stuff after the fact. I don't really know. I don't know all the details. But I can definitely say with Melee, over time I've been able, they did a pretty good job of meshing them together, but you can tell when it's like fake orchestra versus the real orchestra. For instance, Green Greens from Melee is definitely fake orchestra, while Fountain of Dreams from Melee is real orchestra. You can just tell. But granted, they still do a pretty good job of combining the two, but yeah, they are. All right, peace out, Luminella. Is Old Sport still here? Am I able to mod him? I don't think he's a mod, and that's my B. Is Old Sport still here? But yeah, no, yes, you can tell when something's more digital a lot of the time. But I don't know if he's here, but I can ping him. Yeah, I'm just wondering, am I able to mod from the chat thing? Anyway, we'll figure it out. It's been fascinating realizing recently which Sonic Adventure songs don't actually use real instruments. Yeah, like, for instance, I'm pretty sure all the brass in the ice cap zone, the avalanche sequence, pretty sure that's all fake brass. Yeah, I'm here. What's up, Old Sport? Thank you. Hold on, can I mod you? Add moderator. Cool, there we go, perfect. Old Sport now mod. Okay. Oops. Okay, so yeah, that's pretty much these three things. Again, I'm not doing a lot of compression. In fact, there's no compression on the electric piano, and I'm pretty sure there's none on the clavinet. The only one that's got any compression, just to give it a little bit more excitement and pump, I guess, is the piano. And even then, it's pretty light, A lot of it is just figuring out where things need to sit, right? I wanted the clav to be right ear. One thing that I actually do is when I mix a lot of it, like I would say 50 to 70% of the mix, I'm actually mixing in mono. Now, why do I do that? The reason is because I have a better understanding of how everything is sitting and how it cuts through and the volume of it in mono. Because sometimes your ears in stereo can actually fool you a little bit. And the other thing is, if I can get it to sound good in mono, it's probably going to sound good in stereo, And it also is very satisfying when you're mixing dead center the whole time, and then you finally release it from its chains of mono, put it back into stereo, and it sounds so wide and beautiful. And then you know what you can adjust in stereo to make that sound better. But it's fantastic. So I will often listen. I'm literally going to put this on. If you guys have headphones on, you're going to hear this. This is the normal mix in stereo.
They just take so damn long to.
And this is it with mono.
Don't you play the 60?
I mix probably 60% of the time in this situation. Right? I want to make sure everything is clear in mono. Once I've got it all pretty clear in mono, then I'll switch to stereo. That's how I mix probably 90% of the time. What resources would you suggest for beginners getting into audio mixing? Check out Mix with the Masters. Unfortunately, a lot of their stuff, they hide behind a paywall, which it's understandable, but I do think they might charge a little too much. But they are the masters. That might be a bad opinion. I would honestly just... Here's what I would say. Go look up any songs that you love the mix on. Any songs that you really, really like. I would start looking into who mixed that. Start researching on it. See if you can find any information on those people. Go find videos on them. Go find interviews on them. Anything they might talk about. That stuff will help you out a lot, because then you'll realize, oh, that's why that sounds so good. Because he did this, A lot of mix engineers are very friendly and very open to talking about their process and what they do. So yeah, hopefully that helps you. Your music's amazing, dude. I love all the music you make, from your remixes to the WAD stuff. Keep up the amazing work. Hey, thanks, Rocket Does Stuff. I really appreciate that, man. Okay, so now let's move on to the guitars. We'll just go down as it is here. This was another very, very simple stuff going on, I would say, in terms of the mix. But like I said, everything's in the box here, actually. Because everything is in the box, we didn't, the amp is literally right here. So we use the, what they call the Sunshine amp, but it's an emulation of the Orange amp, because that was a popular amp for a lot of funk stuff in the 70s. So I like to use that. Right, so that's his first that's what's going on in right ear. And it's just kind of, it's almost like a pad, you know, he's just playing through the chords very smoothly with his wah pedal. And I've got a little delay pedal on here for him, right? Kind of gives it this smooth, milky kind of sound. Right, and then I got my console EQ cutting out anything under 100 hertz, right? And then bringing up a little bit of actually 700 hertz. I guess I just like that spot, particularly for the wah. And I just brought it up a little bit, 1.5 decibels. And then, yet again, per usual, tape emulation, love this. Didn't need the high end, I like the warmer side of it, so 7.5 IPS. I've got a little bit of what we call tape wow, which is this thing that happens with tape where it may... I can't give you all the technical... I'm a millennial / Gen Zer. But I can't give you all the technical reasons why, but a lot of tape, especially when it gets run down, and you'll hear this a lot, it'll start to bend in pitch a little bit, right? Right? So that actually can add character, though. So sometimes I'll add just a subtle amount, just to add a little bit of personality to the sound. It's not a lot, right? I could show you right now, so we're at 17, let me just remember that. I can show you right now what happens when we turn this way the frick up, okay? Right? That's still quite a bit on there. You can hear how the pitch is bending. But I didn't even have it up that far. I only had it up a little bit just to add a little bit of flair. It just adds a little bit of character, I think. But not so much that it's noticeable or starts making things sound like they're out of pitch, right? Left ear, we've got the actual funk riff, the big shout outs to Chase Akers for all of this. Again, about the same amp settings. Pedal board, this isn't even on, I don't think, for this. I think I turned it on over here. Yeah, I turn on the delay here. Yeah. Again, console EQ. Very simple stuff here. Turning up, because I wanted more of the high end of this, turning up just slightly the 3.2 kilohertz range here. Again, taking out some of the low end. Yeah, I'm keeping it very simple. Not a lot happening there. But yeah, just if you guys have any interest in what it sounds like without the console EQ. And this is with it on. Just adds a little bit of color, adds a little bit more bite. But I'm keeping it very subtle. Same with this side. Let's get rid of both the console EQ and the tape emulation. On. I actually didn't fix that crossfade, so it just kind of pops in there. But I guess you can't really hear it with everything else, right? So there's all that, and then there's these guitars, which I think he threw a little fuzz pedal from his end of the spectrum. Yeah. SSL channel, just to kind of clean up some stuff. You know, I'm just bringing out certain frequencies that help it pop out, but not fighting with anything else, right? That's the goal. Is to just use the EQ not to completely change the sound. Sometimes that's what you want to do, but in this instance, and in most instances for me, what I'm doing with EQ is I'm trying to keep it light, but if I'm using it, it's to just kind of adjust certain tones to either get rid of certain frequencies or bump frequencies to make things pop out, so everything is clearer. And then, it's just a dance between that, compression, and volume. Largely volume. So yeah. There's obviously the drive guitars, kind of lower stuff. You've
Viewed
got
on SNE-US. The games I play, whether good or bad, have tropes.
right. So this is a little bit of a different tone going on here. We use a different amp setting for this. I'm pretty sure we use their emulation of the Marshall, which they call the large tweed. So we use that. I use the Ribbon 121 mic setting for it. Console EQ yet again. Cutting out a little bit of low end. Obviously I want to keep some of it in because it's giving it that beef, right? I really wanted to have these guitars stack the bass. I guess this is a compositional point I didn't make earlier, but I really wanted these to stack the bass to really give this part some oomph, right? Bam, bam, bam. To ba da down, right? So, right. So with that low beefy bass, it's got this kind of you feel it, you know? And I like the moving between the squeakiness of the guitar. Sometimes you don't want that, but I like the realism of that kind of stuff. I don't try to get rid of that. Once again, I'm trying to beef it up, so 7.5 IPS, get that warmer sound, tape emulation all over the place, all over freaking everything. Input was on. It's kind of funny hearing myself like that. It's a cool effect. Should use it sometime. Yeah, same deal. Probably a little bit of tape wow is my guess. Yeah, a little bit, but yeah, by and large. Just got here. We've done the vocals already because I want to watch how you do them. I talked about how we did the vocals, but I haven't talked about the mixing phase of it. I haven't talked about how I mixed them. But we did already talk about generally about the arrangement and how that was handled. But yeah. Sorry to barge in with this question, but who came up with the SNES line? That was Scott. That was Scott, yeah. Did you base this on a specific song, whether it was from a game or by someone specific? Yeah, I mentioned this earlier, but main influences were Disney villain songs, Persona 5, Final Fantasy, and just JRPG stuff in general. But then also Hamilton was a big influence. So yeah. Yeah, so that's that guitar part. One thing I haven't mentioned is the reverbs. I'm using them subtly. Obviously, I don't want it to be this giant effect. It's more about having them live in a space. That's what's most important to me, is reverb being there to, if it's not already baked into the sound, to be there to help the sound live in a space. You know what I mean? Sometimes it is used as an effect, and that's awesome, but primarily my reason for reverb is to have it breathe. You know what I mean? If I do use it. And again, I was referencing Hamilton when I was mixing this, so I was kind of mixing similarly to that, where you've got a little bit of almost that stage-ish sounding reverb in the back. So there's a little reverb in the piano here. I can turn off this reverb so you can hear what it's like without it. So here's without it. And here's with it on. It just, you feel, it's like, oh, now it's suddenly like we're not like in this tiny little boxed in room with the mic like right here. Now we can actually feel like, oh, it's a piano on like on a stage or in a bigger room. You know what I mean? It's very subtle. I don't want it that loud. I still want it to sound tight, but it's just enough that you kind of, it feels like it's somewhere. It's not just in this little non-realistic room. You know what I mean? Same kind of goes for the clavinet. I think I'm using might be using a slightly different reverb on this guy. So this is without any reverb right here. Listen to this. This is with the reverb on. See? So it allows it, again, it's very subtle. You almost might even need to turn it up, but it just is enough that you feel like it's actually in a space. Maybe in the middle of somewhere, huh? Stupid. Wah, wah, wah. Yeah. And I do that for a lot of the bass. I don't put any reverb on. I rarely do. There are reasons to put reverb on bass, but I very rarely do it because most of the time it just muddies it up. You know, I'm sure. Oh yeah, I didn't even show you guys the guitars at the front end of the of this with the hits isolated. We just decided to throw random funny crap at the. We were just like, you know, it's just one of those things where I have an idea and then we're just like, what about this? Oh, let me do this crazy stupid thing, and that's what happens. There's just a whole bunch of random takes of us making noise, essentially, which is a lot of fun. Honestly, you should try it sometimes. But actually, the initial guitar, this thing, I mentioned to Chase Akers, guitar player, how One Winged Angel, if you actually look into it, Nobuo mentions how his influence for that was actually Purple Haze by Jimi Hendrix. Now, Nobuo, the composer of the Final Fantasy series, the classic ones, 1 through 9 primarily, though still some stuff following. Anyway, he has always been a huge classic rock nerd. He loves classic rock. And so One Winged Angel was actually inherently, that beginning part was very heavily inspired by Purple Haze by Jimi Hendrix. Obviously, again, for content ID purposes, and I'm not going to play it, but you can go look it up. Purple Haze by Jimi Hendrix is literally the very beginning. Bam, 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 bam. You're immediately gonna hear it and go, hey, that sounds like One Winged Angel, because that's what Nobuo took it from. So I told Chase that, I showed him it, and he was like, let's just do that with the guitar at the front. So that's what we did. We essentially tried to emulate One Wing / Purple Haze. And you've got some other takes here. You've got obviously the primary two, but then you've got, let me show you these other ones. Right, you got that, you got this one. And then you've got this. Perfect! Noise! Yeah, that's the guitars for the most part. I don't think there's too much more to it. I showed you guys the smooth, sexy part, which is this. Again, just some SSL. I didn't use console on this because I wanted a bit of a cleaner sound, so I used SSL channel, but I still want that like analog kind of console sound. It's just a little bit cleaner, I think. I wanted the tone of the SSL for this. And then, again, tape emulation. I don't need the top end. I want the warmer sound. 7.5 IPS. I think you guys get the theme now. But yeah, that's how... And it's just picking out those slight frequencies. Again, I don't want to mess with the EQ too much. There's not a lot of heavy carving or anything here. But yeah. So that's that. Bass I already talked about. I actually already talked about how I got the sound. But yeah. There's that. Drums. Yet again, not trying to overmix here, but just for those of you that don't know, generally the way things go when recording drums, and there's no like rule, but the tried and true method, I suppose the general way people record, and usually the best way to record, is kick mic, snare top mic, snare bottom mic. Sometimes you are perfectly fine just to have a snare top mic. Honestly, that works a lot of the time. But having a snare bottom, you get a little bit more of that snare rattle. So you've got that. Here I've got the snare sample for the trigger. That's obviously not necessary for recording. So far, kick mic, snare top mic, snare bottom mic, hat mic, tom mic, floor tom mic, so high tom mic and floor tom. If you have another tom, you'll probably want to put a mic on that one too. Overheads, which is the two mics, stereo mics that you set up above the drums, so you get the whole general sound. You get like the cymbals, you get the general stereo sound, and then you've got your room. A lot of times you don't need this or won't use it, but it's just it's just mics like at the back of the room getting all the room sound, you know? So I will show you guys all of this one by one. Here's the kick track, right? And I believe, again, SSL channel, I wanted kind of a cleaner tone from it. Bringing up around 100-ish hertz, 90 hertz it looks like, because I want it to sit above the bass. The bass I've got turning up roughly, what is this, 70 hertz. So I have the bass sitting more a little bit, and I usually have this where the dance between the kick and the bass is having the kick have all the punch, but let the bass have all the bass. You know what I mean? So it's not that the kick can't have the bass, but I like to have the bass sit lower than the kick, right? So I've got it at around 90 to 100 hertz here. And then the other thing is grabbing some of the punch from the hit, from the higher end. There's a kind of a mid-range that the kick thrives in. And for here, it's around the 3 kilohertz range. I'm turning that up a bit. And then I'm also actually cutting out a little bit of like the lowest end, right? Just so that it's not fighting or having any issues with the bass, perhaps. I've got some... I've got some compression on this, not a lot. You can see how much is pulling back here. It's not crazy heavy, but it's, you know, it's definitely giving it a little bit more punch. But that's your kick track. And you can hear a little bit of the audio from the other hits in there. But essentially what I'm doing is I've got this noise gate that pretty much just will pick up the signal from the kick and then immediately try and get rid of any other sound right afterwards, right? So that's what I'm doing here. So if I turn this off, this is what the track sounds like without the SSL. The SSL is doing most of the dirty work here. And this is with it on. So there's that. There's your kick track. You got your snare top. And like I said earlier, he had a snare that was a little bit more lower and beefy, and I wanted a bit of a higher, crisper sound, similar, again, to Hamilton. So what I did is I did some EQ tricks to take out a lot of low end. I'm taking out past 225 hertz, which is pretty high. So I'm taking out a lot of the low end here, brightening it up a little bit. Again, I've got a little bit of compression. The release is slower because I wanted to kind of grab that front transient, and then the compression just kind of doesn't let off for a little bit longer, so you don't have this weird, like, all the ringing. Right? I actually don't have as heavy of a noise gate on this. Here's without that on. You can hear more of the low end. Right. That just takes out some of it. So that's the snare top mixed with the snare bottom, which again is getting you some of that rattle. The rattle, I'm taking out most of the low end here. I definitely don't need it with this rattle. Right, turning up the higher end because I want that rattle that he's grabbing from the snare. And I've got an exciter, which is just exciting a certain frequency, and I've put it at about 4200 hertz here, or 4.2 kilohertz, whichever you want to do. Scott used auto-tuner, or is it all natural? I use a little bit of what we call flex pitch. So pretty much I just pick certain things he sings that I would like to just adjust a little bit in terms of the pitch. But I didn't want it to be perfect sounding. I think part of the character and part of the comedy is that it's not perfect sounding, right? So I did not perfect it all that much. I only fixed a few notes that that he was either too sharp or too flat on. So, all right, peace out, Phil. Thanks for coming by, man. Definitely be checking out all your projects in the near future. Hey, thanks, man. Appreciate that. Yeah, so then the top and the bottom snare mics mixed together. Right? just top, just bottom, both of them together. But then the big kicker is the sample, the snare trigger. This is, I'm pretty sure he used a plugin for it where pretty much he uses a snare sample that plays anytime it picks up a transient that's loud enough, right? So it only hits on the main hits, you know, any of those little ghost notes it doesn't hit on, but... Right? And I've got a little bit of a reverb on this guy too. It's from a Slate's Verb Suite. I'm using the CLA AL2 drum verb patch. I'm adjusting it a little bit. I increased the decay and whatnot. Took out some of the low end, right? I wanted it to be, you know, pretty crisp and clean. But I wanted some reverb on that snare. So the snare sample, here's the snare sample by itself. Right? Mixed with the real snare. And there you go. There's your snare sound. Next is the hat. This one's pretty simple. It just focuses on the hat. Honestly, I just brightened it up a little bit, took out the low end, and that's all she wrote, really. I didn't think too much about this. I added some reverb to this one to give it a little bit more, you know, of that stage feel. Because, again, I wanted it to sound... I wanted that Hamilton sound. I wanted to give it a little bit of that stage reverb, if you will. You've got your toms, SSL channel, turning up, kind of lower end, 120 here. But cutting out, you know, some of the lowest end so it's not fighting with anything down there. Right, and we've got that hard left. Right, so you got that, and then you got your second tom. Right, and I've got a compressor on these, a separate compressor, and it's the Opto, which is Logic's emulation of the LA2A. And I'm using this because I feel like it brings out a little bit of the toms, and I also can get rid of a little bit of that potentially annoying ringing at the tail end. Just a little bit. Again, I'm not compressing hard here. You can look. See? Like, not a lot, you know? It's very light, and that goes for both toms. But I do like the way the LA2A works with the toms. So... or again, as Logic calls it, the vintage Opto. So there's that. And then you got your overheads. Like I said, this is 2 stereo mics above the drums, getting just the overall sound, if you will. Now, because I already have a focus kick and snare sound and all that, I'm not going to try and bring out any of that here. So I'm actually going to take out a lot of low end of that area here. And then I brighten it up a little bit because I want to make sure those crashes really stand out, you know, and then I'm taking out a little bit of like the 200 frequency, which can be a little bit of an annoying area, and a lot of sounds. So I'm taking out a little bit of that. And again, really no compression here. I've got a tape emulator on this guy, but like I said, I don't want to get rid of that brightness, so it's at 15 IPS, so I'm not really getting rid of too much there. So yeah. And this is the overheads. This is those 2 mics above. Right, and then you've got, and this is kind of tucked back. This is kind of tucked back in there, but you've got your room mics. 2 mics at the very far back of his room. My dad's gotten his room down to a science. Honestly, most of the sound here, I'm just getting it in the right spot. But most of the sound is from my dad's playing and from his really great audio engineering. You know, he knows how to get a really good sound. Yeah, so this is kind of what the room sounds like. The intent often with the room is to really pull out the room sound, so we compress it a lot, we slam it a lot, so you really get a lot of that the room sound. Right? So that's kind of snug back in there. I'm bringing up a little bit of the mids here to really bring out, give it some bite, and then I'm honestly on top of already being kind of compressed. So this is without the SSL channel. It's already kind of compressed. And then I just slam it. So then you've got your rooms, your overheads, and then all your individual mics for the certain drums. So we're gonna go one by one here, and we're gonna go backwards. Well, here, this is what we're gonna do. Room, overhead. I'm gonna put a loop on this, actually. Shoot. No. Come on. All right, so room and overheads. Let's start from the beginning. Room, overheads, kick, right, and then snare top, snare bottom, snare sample, actual hat mic, which is just adding a little bit, and then your toms. And there you go. Boom. And there you go. That's your drum tone. Like I said, I'm keeping it pretty simple, pretty clean. Pretty clean mix here. So yeah, that's that. I guess I brightened it up maybe a tad here, but yeah, that's your drum bus right there. That's the drums. The other thing I should actually mention though is automation or writing the faders. A lot of mixing is actually not simply just what you put on the sound, but adjusting the volume over the course of the track. So the volume changes according to however you need it to for that part of the track, right? So with the drums, I turned up the snare top and bottom because I don't use the snare sample in this beginning here. Oops. Stop it.
SNE-US. The games I play, whether good
right, so I turn up the snare bottom and top there, but then I bring it down here once we get in the snare sample here, so that it's all mixed properly. And the same way, one of the big things that I like to do, that my dad actually taught me, was writing the faders with the overheads for those cymbals, right? So turn up the cymbals just a little bit at the very beginning of a hit, so it gives it a little bit more, and then bring it back down, right? So as you can see here, there's a big crash hit here, and I bring it up just a little bit and then bring it right back down. Again, right here. I do a little bit of it again in these areas, but this is the primary spot here. I just bring it up for a moment and then bring it back down. Right? Yeah. So there's that. And, that goes for a lot of this. Here you can see I slightly turned down the piano because I felt like it was just a tad too loud in the pretty spot.
God, are my tastes just bad?
Did your dad also work in music? He's the drummer on this song. Yes, he's a professional. He's a professional producer and mix engineer and session drummer. Yeah. So yeah. Yes, he does also work in music. Yeah, so that's all that. Can't believe you put all that effort. Again, a lot of that is from my dad. He already is a fantastic player. I fixed none of that. He already had the right tones and everything. From there, all I'm doing is just pretty much getting things sitting in the right place how I want them. But honestly, Dad, did 80% of the work, I'd say. And I think that's ultimately the key is to get a good mix, you need to get a good sound from the start. And you also make some music for Is It's Awesome Baby video, or am I thinking of someone else? I think you're thinking of someone else. I don't think I did music for that one. I've got these transition effects here, which are like reverse cymbals. People that have been following me for a while probably are familiar with this. I love using those to kind of swell up, to kind of ramp up a moment and then move into another section. There's this patch that I use a lot called Airfield. It sounds exactly what it's called. In percussion, you've got your bell tree. I love the bell tree. the chimes. Again, great tone for this pretty spot, right? I want to kind of give it that pretty moment.
God, are my tastes just bad? Am I?
So, you know, there's all of that. Yeah. I mean, I guess I could real quick dive into percussion. I really didn't think very hard about this. Most of this was just gain staging, just getting all the volumes in the right spot and panning it accordingly. So I've got my maracas. Almost all these, I'm pretty sure all these are just logic loops for the record. Maracas, right? I'm adding a little bit of reverb to a lot of this, again, to give it that space, to feel like it's maybe on a stage or something, but it's very subtle. You know, I don't have a lot of reverb. It's really what I'm more concerned about is, can I feel it? Not necessarily can I hear it, but can I feel it, you know? So this tambourine actually is from a different guy, great drummer. I don't actually know how to say his name. Ifa Jr. I hope that's how you say it. He plays for Moonchild. If you guys have heard of them, you guys should definitely check out Moonchild. But yeah, he just had a whole sample pack. I grabbed it, and he had a great little tambourine loop. So I use that a lot. Right, so I use it there. Again, very slight EQ, but I'm really not doing a lot here. I'm really not. Conga groove. Got a little bit of tape saturation to give it a little bit of that warm distortion. I got a console EQ on this. Again, another color that I like on this. Turning up a little bit of 220 hertz here, just a little bit of that low end, but then cutting out some of the lowest end, right? Because again, I want to try and keep it clean here. So that's conga groove number 1, I guess you could say, which is more in the left ear, and then you got this guy. Again, same deal, the tape emulation, giving it a little bit of that analog distortion, and then console EQ. I love console EQ, as you can pick up at this point. And then I got the record scratch, which kind of, I feel like adds to the rap part, right? Right, and I actually do want more low end there. I'm still cutting out some of the lowest end, but I'm turning up some of the mid-low, right? Because I really want to grab that low end there. Right. So... yeah, so there's that. Okay. So there's the percussion and the drums. And then you've got sure, we'll talk about the strings real quick. So, like I said, I'm using Cinematic Studio Strings. Fantastic library, gorgeous. Probably my favorite, personally. I think, you know, a lot of people talk about it. It's a little too dark sounding, not meaning like, ooh, evil dark, or like, ooh, that's intense dark, but literally like it's not as bright and top endy, which I get, but I feel like I can pull out a little bit of that anyway out of it, if I need to, and it just has the most emotion to it. I feel like. But there's other great libraries. This is my personal pick, I would say, though. My personal favorite. When was this all recorded? Between November and December. It was pretty quick, I would say, in a month and a half to 2 months tops. And we finished it right before he had to release the video. So, yeah. So, obviously, per usual, you've got your 5 different string parts that I arranged. Your first violins, your second violins, your violas, your cellos, and your basses, or your double basses, or contra, whatever you want to call it. So you've got, let me find a good spot here. And as you can see, it was MIDI. Well, you may not see that it was MIDI, but it was MIDI, and I bounced it down for the sake of power. Right, so that's your first violins, your second violins. Violas, There you go. Cellos. Right, so there you go. I didn't use double basses here. Some spots have double basses. Here's a spot with double basses. Right. So I programmed that all and I arranged all that. But part of the sound, right? So I'm doing a little bit to the EQ here. I'm brightening it up, like I said, bringing up a little bit in the mid highs, taking out a little bit of the 1K. Like I said, I like this spot for the piano. This is a spot that the strings often will be prominent in, but I want to take it down a little bit because I want the piano to hold that spot, right? So I'm taking out a little bit of that. Generally the same deal across the board. I'm taking out the low end on the cellos and the basses. I'm saying cellos, but it's really celli, but screw formality in English. It's celli though. I said cellos because my English is awful. And I would probably get shot if I said cellos in in the studio. But yeah, anyway. So I'm taking out some of the low end there. Same with the basses. Yeah. So that's the original samples. Already sounds pretty good. I've got on top, there's already some reverb baked into, there's real reverb baked into the sample, which is great. I love that. Again, tape emulation. Wow, Garrett, anything new? No. A little bit of extra SSL EQ on top, but yeah. And then I'm taking out, again, a little bit of 200 range. I'm not a huge fan of this spot for a lot of instruments. It gets annoying. It does have its spots, especially for like snares. Snares can sound great there. But yeah. So getting rid of a little bit of that. But then I've got this reverb that I'm sending it all to on this bus, right? So I've got all these individual tracks are going to this single bus, this one track, essentially. And in that track is Chromaverb, one of my favorite reverbs, and there's a patch called Orchestral Hall. I usually just turn up the pre-delay quite a bit more than it already is at, because I like to let the strings have their own spot to, the initial sound kick in before the reverb kicks in, let the initial sound have its moment for a second. But yeah, so I've got a little bit of that extra Orchestral Hall reverb on it. This is without it on. Already sounds pretty good, but this is with it on. Just gives it a little bit more space. This question sucks. I didn't see the question. What was the question? Could have shut up. Sorry, Garrett. No, dude. Bro, what was your question? Don't feel bad about it. Sorry, I didn't see the question. So the other thing, though, is part of, and this is actually a classic move that they do when actually working, because I've been to a lot of string sessions. There's this sound that's very, what am I saying? It's just a very prominent approach when recording real strings, is they'll stack the strings a lot of times, especially if you have less players. And oftentimes what they'll do is they'll stack with what they'll call mutes, or I think the more, there's a more formal term for it, but it's leaving me at the moment. So this one sound prominent in funk and disco. I have no idea what instruments are what is that one? The one currently that I'm soloing at the moment, or are you talking about what I'm playing? This? Are you asking about the DAW? My software? It's Logic Pro 10. Yeah, so this is just the initial sound, right? But then there's essentially a different kind of bow that string players will use that we, I think, informally call mutes. And so they have that option in Cinematic Studio Strings to set them. So essentially I just copy paste it. I'll maybe slightly change the timing of everything so it's not perfect. It's not all exactly the same, right? And then you've got this. Right, it's got a different tone to it. It's a little bit brighter. It's taking out a little bit of that mid-range. Right? So then that on top of this. All right, so it's already thicker. Here's the next trick that I do. I've literally called it string thickener. I use a patch and omnisphere for the softer parts here. I don't use it for all of it, as you can see here. Please don't freeze on me. I love omnisphere. Freaking love omnisphere. There's this one patch. This is a trick that I was taught by my buddy Chipper. And it's called Adagio Espressivo. I don't ask me to say these correctly. But yeah. What am I getting at? I'm losing my train of thought again. Anyway, okay, so there's this sample in here. It's this big, it's not very realistic, but it's a very great, big, giant, wide sample of a string. And so what I'll do is I'll copy paste all the notation, I'll throw it in here, and I'll put it way at the back, and I'll make sure it's nice and wide and big. It's got some reverb on it, right? I've got some what we call sample delay, which essentially just delays one of the ears, one of the channels in one of the ears, and it gives it more of a stereo flare, right? Because you're widening it that way. And so not very realistic. However, stacked on top of these, it thickens it a little bit, right? So here's without any of that added stuff. Already sounds pretty good. Now let's thicken it. So here's the mutes and the string thickener. So it brightens it and thickens it. It's got more life to it now. It sounds a little larger. What VST do you really recommend buying? I have Serum. That's about it. I mean, I would strongly suggest Omnisphere. That's one of my favorites. If you're looking at synthesizers, then I'd say Omnisphere, 100%. But I'm also a huge sucker for really good sample libraries. You know, so it depends on what you're asking. It depends on what you're looking for. But if you're talking about synthesizers, I'd say 100% Omnisphere. Because Serum's already great. So yeah, that's that, and then I've got the string stab sample, which is from Logic Pro's session strings. Again, like I said earlier, I don't actually have a string dip like that classic disco string thing. I don't have that with Cinematic Studio strings, but I do with Logic, so I just combined them. Right? Yeah, and again, adding in that hall reverb. Actually, I've got a string room reverb in here just to make it kind of sound a little bit closer to this guy. So this is without either of those reverbs on. Right. Add in the room reverb, the studio room. Right. Okay, now it sounds like it's in a studio. Now let's add the hall. Boom. Perfecto. It's perfection. Yeah, so there you go. I do a little bit of EQ again to try and match it up just a little bit closer because it's brighter than the Cinematic Studio string. So I changed the EQ just a little bit, doled it over here and brought up the mid-highs just to make it sound a little bit closer to Cinematic Studio strings. I knew they weren't going to sound exactly the same, and so I just kind of went with it. But you get my what I'm going for. Okay, so for anybody that is curious, now that we've gotten through all that, we can get to the vocals and me mixing the vocals. So a big thing that I'm just going to go off the bat and say, writing the faders. Automation is huge. Scott's mic is not the highest of quality. It's not, the worst thing ever, but it's not great. I'm sure he knows that. So especially with him, but this goes for anything. A lot of it is really focusing on just finding the tiny little syllables, the tiny little consonants, at whatever it may be, vowels, and turning it up or down depending, right? So I'll just find spots. That needs to be a little bit louder. That needs to be a little bit softer, Need to clarify it. Make sure it's clear, because we want to make sure it's loud, but it's sitting in the mix, right? It doesn't sound like it's on top of the track. It sounds like it's in the track, right? That's very important. So, but writing the faders is a big deal. I'm saying writing the faders, that's kind of the classic term, but in modern day talk, it is automation. Sounds like a botch of a process. It's true. It's true. It's tedious, but it is worth it. It is tedious, but it is worth it. You can check out here just how much I'm doing to Scott's vocal here. All just volume. And that's probably the key thing. But, just so you guys know, here's what else I'm throwing on there. SSL, once again, per usual. Brightening it up quite a bit. Up at around, 9 kilohertz. Bringing up 6 decibels. That's a lot. And then I'm bringing up roughly 2.4 kilohertz. There's a little spot there that I think Scott peaks at a little bit, so I just turn it up just a little bit. And then I turn down around 1K. Again, same area where that piano is, if only I could speak. Because, I like the piano there, but I don't like that tone in Scott's voice, and in a lot of voices. Sometimes it's cool, sometimes it sounds good. There's a lot of points in which I don't want to hear that. This is one of them. So I took it down quite a bit here. And then, again, I'm cutting out some of the lowest frequencies, but I don't want to cut out too much because I do want to hear kind of the more beefy low end of Scott's vocals. Just cutting out enough that it's not fighting with the lowest of ends. Not doing any compression with the SSL. But I've got a extra channel EQ on here, just cleaning up some stuff. Taking out one little spot where essentially what I'll do is I'll sit here and I'll be like, man, there's something that I don't like. So I spike that spot, right? This tiny little frequency spot, I'll spike it. I'll kind of move it around and find where that irritating sound is. I'll hear this very prominent ring wherever that is. Boom, cut it out. Take it out of there. So that's what I'm doing here. There's one little spot where there's a frequency, I guess around 2700 hertz, that was driving me crazy with Scott. It's not Scott's fault. It was just part of the room, part of the mic, whatever it was. But let me go ahead and show you what this sounds like without any of the plugins on. Let me solo it too.
Turn bass battles in too much text.
We're also going to get rid of the reverb.
Turn bass battles in too much text. I'd rather be out not having sex. Menu cluttering.
So here's with the SSL on. All right, so this is going to do a lot.
Turn bass battles in too much text. I'd rather be out not having sex.
Right, so we've already, right there, we have lifted the blanket, right? And now there's a lot more clarity, it's a lot more present.
And random encounters can kiss my ass. No gameplay till hours in.
Right, so there's that. On top of that, though, the channel EQ, which I'm...
Ass.
So here's without that channel EQ, taking out some of those frequencies and adjusting some other things. Again, that 200 hertz range bugs me a little bit.
Ass. No gameplay till hours in. Combat ready? How did I win? The same thing happens over again.
Right, so I got rid of that annoying frequency. You may have noticed a little bit of a difference there. And then finally, on top of all that, vintage FET Logic Pro compressor. This is the cherry on top. This brings out a lot of the oomph. This brings some of the presence. And again, I'm not compressing a lot, though.
Combat ready? How did
Never mind, I am compressing a lot on this.
No gameplay till hours
I think I really wanted to just really bring out... I thought I could have sworn that I didn't compress as much on this, but I didn't. This is actually one of those instances where I was like, all right, I really got to bring it out. However, what I'm seeing here... Okay, all right, it's coming back to me. It's coming back to me. Here we go. So here's what happened. I've got this, what we call parallel compression, which is literally... as simple as a knob now, but it used to be different. I won't go into the specifics of how it used to be different, but it used to be different. But now you can literally just adjust a mix knob. So essentially, with the mix knob down, that means that I'm getting 32% of the compression, and the rest of it is the original signal, right?
Count pad ready. How did I win? The same thing happens.
So if I turn this input, if I turn this mix all the way up, listen to this.
Ass. No gameplay till hours in. Count pad ready. How did I win?
Turn it
the
all the
same
way
thing
down.
happens over again.
It's no compression.
And that their fun part comes up when I missed. No gameplay till hours in.
Right.
Count pad ready. How did I win?
So I like to count. I wanted to mix it just a little bit, right? So we're getting some of that slamming, but not so much that it takes out the life of Scott's vocal, right? Because it's very easy to take a compressor and just slam things and take out all the life, just squash the living daylights out of it. You know what I mean? So yeah. But yeah, vintage Fett. So here's without any of it on again. Here's without any of it on.
Count pad ready. How did I win? The same thing happens over again. And that their fun part comes up when I missed one thing and now I'm lost.
And that's with it on. And then the reverb, right? So I've got one reverb, again, a little bit of a stage verb, I would say.
Count pad ready. How did I win? The same thing happens over again.
It's pretty subtle, but again, it's now it lives in a space. Now Scott's vocals sound like they're somewhere, which is nice. That's good. We want that, especially with this kind of mix. And then I've got a little bit of a plate reverb from Lustrous Plates. I think I got this from Slate as well. Steel plate, pre-delay up quite a bit, and taking out quite a bit of low end of the plates.
Count pad ready. How did I win? The same thing happens over again. And that's
right, so now we've definitely got that stage sound. Again, referencing Hamilton pretty heavily on that.
Count pad ready. How did I win? The same thing happens over again. And that their fun part comes up when I miss.
So this has been asked before, but does Scott actually? Yeah, he does sing. Let me show you.
Neither.
Nope, not right there. Where is it? Here it is.
Are my tastes just bad? Am I the one to blame? Or is it RPGs that are dumb and lame?
So you can hear a lot more when it's isolated, but I did adjust. I didn't want it to be perfect, and I know I keep mentioning this. I didn't want it to be perfect, so I didn't actually auto-tune him, but I use this thing called flex pitch in Logic, which essentially allows me to adjust certain notes that he might be too flat or too sharp on. So I did that, but I didn't want it to be perfect. So, I let a lot of the realistic, slightly pitchiness stay in there.
They just take so damn long to complete. 60 hours just to rinse and repeat.
Yeah. So I tried to avoid doing too much tuning because I wanted to have that comedic characteristic to it. But, he's saying for the most part on pitch regardless. He can do it. That's for sure. And he great performance. His great performance all around. He did a great job with the performance. As my dad always says, I can fix tuning. I can't fix a bad performance. And Scott got the performance down. So, is the key of the song decided before the lyrics were written? All the instrumental was figured out before the lyrics were written. Yes. Yeah. Scott a tenor? That's actually a good question. I have no clue. I assume he probably is, but I'm actually not sure. Just from hearing his voice, I had a feeling he and I were roughly in the same vocal range, so I wrote according to that. And he didn't seem to have any issues with it. He didn't seem to have any trouble. So, but yeah, that's Scott's vocals. Again, a lot of writing the faders here, but that's the deal with Scott's vocals. If you want to hear it a little bit more.
It's not Blink Smash Geist or Burnout Crash, not Mario Party 6 or Ultra Smash, neither Clubhouse Games or Wii Fit Plus, nor Family Feud on SNE-US. All the games I play, whether...
Anyway, yeah, so there you go. That's... and then you've got your other vocals, your backing vocals, your extra vocals. How long did the whole song making process take? I keep answering this question. Roughly a month and a half to 2 months. If anybody starts remembering my questions, go ahead and answer them for anybody. It's not a problem that you're asking. It's a popular question. Anyway, so yeah, I already kind of broke down the crowd and Zach. Again, very, very simple mixing here. A lot of this is just subtle stuff. You know, if you've got a good tone to begin with, a good sound from the mic, you're already 80% of the way there, right? So I do a little bit of stuff with SSL. I'm not going to get too much into that. You know, again, same reverbs as I'm using on Scott.
Why don't you play them?
Not very prominent, but you can hear the reverb. You feel it more than you hear it. That's the big thing for me. You know, and then again, you've got Emma's vocals with Zach's harmony.
But you could grind for years just to beat that bossa.
Yeah, and the mice.
Beat that bossa.
Stole this time on
So,
Pete.
But you could grind for years just to beat that bossa.
Why waste all this time on just one game?
Why don't you play them?
yep. Yeah, and then of course I mixed Scott's actual dialogue in here. That was a bit tough because he didn't record it as like correctly, if you will. And you know, that's not his main focus. But like I did have to do some tweaking to it.
I just don't like them. I just want to play stupid Nintendo games that aren't this stupid.
But why don't I like them? Okay.
Right. So it wasn't very well recorded, so I had to do some fixing to it. I used this thing called RX6 Isotope RX6 declip, which essentially picks up where it might be clipping and tries to pull it back. I think it did a fairly good job of cleaning it up, especially in the track. It's not that bad.
Don't you play them?
I just don't like them. I just want to play stupid Nintendo games that aren't this stupid.
But why don't I like them? Okay.
Again, some automation here to really get stuff to pop out, right? And then yeah, the harmonies here. But yeah, like I said, I won't get too deep into the mixing here. Very, very simple, pretty simple mixing here. You know, just what I need to get it to sound good. But I'm not doing a lot of hardcore stuff. I'm not getting down to that, especially because of time. You know, and also because it didn't really need it. You know.
Why don't you play them?
They're so good though.
You can't have opinions.
Why
don't you play them?
Emma's opera.
You play them. Start a new file. Why don't you?
Yeah, and then with Scott on top.
They're so good though.
Listen, guys.
You can't have opinions. Why don't you play them?
They're not my style.
Start a new file. Why don't you?
Yep, and there you go. Ta-da! Yeah, and I love how Zach has got like this high part that just kind of cuts through. It kind of reminds me of Danny Avidan a little bit. Avidan, I don't know how to, did I say his last name right? Where is that? Is that here?
Why don't?
Well, I gotta get rid of the other stuff here. Oop.
Why don't you?
Yeah, that high part kind of reminded me of Danny Sexbang. Yeah, I thought that was pretty great. He's got a great vocal range. Yeah, so there you go. The one thing I didn't touch on, because I kind of forgot I don't know how I forgot to bring this up with the compositional half of this, but the saxophone. That is 90% just his playing and his sound, you know? The pretty much 8% after that is the reverb, just giving it a space to live in. So this is without anything on it. Without the reverb, it feels pretty closed in and weird, you know? Just because that's... Right? So then, I've got this plugin. This is really the only spot I used it, shockingly. I use this a lot. The Lindell 80 from Plugin Alliance. A great plugin because it's an emulation of the Neve 1080, which is another great analog piece of hardware. They do a great job emulating it. I wanted to brighten it up, so 16 kilohertz here. Bam, turn that up a little bit, and I brought out roughly around 1.6 kilohertz. That was just a spot that I felt kind of sounded honky, if you will, from the saxophone, so I wanted to get rid of that. And yeah, that's pretty much it. It's pretty much all I did here. No compression. So this is without any of that on. This is with the Lindell 80 on now. Just giving it a little bit more presence. Right, and then the next thing is the saxophone. What am I saying? Not the, yes, of course, we've been on the saxophone, you idiot. The tape emulation. Again, 15 IPS because I want the brightness of it. I've got a little bit of tape wow. Again, that thing that kind of does a slight tape pitch bending, but it's very slight. I'm not, just a little bit. Just a little bit. So there's that. And then channel EQ, I'm just making a little bit of an extra adjustment here. There's a little spot here I wasn't a fan of, around 3K, that I wanted to take out. Right, and that's the tone. So then the rest of it is just reverb, right? So I've got that plate reverb, the same one I used on Scott. So I send the audio signal to this auxiliary for this plate. That's already most of it. Before I show you that, though, I already showed you that, but let me show you the slap delay. This is a classic thing that we like to do, where we literally have a delay that plays once right back immediately after. You'll hear this a lot, really anywhere. This is used a lot, but it first became prominent in the 50s, I would say. So let me turn that off. So now listen to it without it on. So there's without it on. Here's with the slap delay on. Right? So now we feel like we're almost like on stage somewhere, something, and it's thick. It's thickening the sax, and then the plate reverb. Bam! Beautiful.
What did I expect?
Why don't you play them so good though?
Listen, guys.
You can have opinions.
Why don't you play them?
Not my style.
Why don't you?
Beautiful. And that's pretty much it. I guess there's these other transitional effects. There's this backwards low and rumbly boom that I threw in there to really ramp up the kind of feel to it. Right on top of then the reverse crash cymbal. And that's it. I think that's everything. I think I have now covered everything. It's been 3 hours and I've covered everything. I hope you guys are happy. Yeah, that's pretty much the track. If there's any final questions, hit me up. Let me know now. Now's the time. Now would be the time to let me know if you have any other questions. Thank you everybody for tuning in. We actually had some pretty good viewership, better viewership than I expected. So thank you guys so much for being here. I'm glad you guys actually were this interested and cared this much about the process and the making of this song. This is a lot of fun to do. This was seriously an absolute blast to work on. So, whoops, I didn't mean to do that. This seriously, truly was a blast to work on. And I really love how it turned out. So, had over 100 at one point. Yeah, I saw that. I saw that, actually. That was fantastic. So chord structure of the sax lick. Are you just talking about the chords under the sax? Let's see. Let me see if I can remember them from... Oh, I got MIDI on. Give me a second. Let me get on some actual audio here. No. Okay, hold on. Let me play it back. I actually already forget the chord progression. So what that is a C sharp minor 7 add 9 to up a fourth to F sharp 7 add, what is that, a 13 I think? Yeah, I guess you could say add 13 there. Up to minor third, up from that is A major 7 add 9 or add 2, whatever you want to say. Up to, what is that, that's a 7 sus 4, isn't it? That is a B, let's say that's a B7 sus 4. Add, what would that be? I'm not thinking at the moment. It's essentially, you could think of it as B over A, or excuse me, A over B. A6 over B. That might be the best way to look at it. Alright, so C sharp minor 7, add 9. Up a fourth to the F sharp 7, add 13. Up a third, minor third, to the B major 7, add 2 or 9. I don't know how you would say it. I feel like you would maybe say 2, but one way or another, either works, I believe. 2, I suppose the way I could say it in simplest forms is A6, A major 6, so just a triad with 6 in the top, over B. And that's essentially what he's playing. Now, and I add some embellishments, but that's essentially what it is. I think the second time around, there's a movement to get it to that mod. Yeah, there is. So, second time around. Yeah, so it goes. It moves up from that B major 7 add 9 to the up a fourth to the D13. And then it goes up again to not that. I think it goes to that, right? Yeah, it does. Yeah, anyway, so yeah, there you go. Thank you for doing these breakdowns, Garrett. They're helpful and educational. Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad that they are. That's what I'm hoping. So I guess I had a little bit of a chromatic movement there. So what is that? That's all it is. It's what is that? A diminished 7th? Yeah, A diminished 7th over C. So I guess it's kind of a C diminished. Yeah. It kind of just is a C, but anyway. And that's, I'm walking upright, so it's like, and then up to the D13, and then whatever it does after that. Anyway, so yeah. You betcha. So there you go. Hope you guys enjoyed this. Thank you guys so much for watching. Really, truly appreciate all you guys tuning in and being here. You guys rock. I definitely got to go now. I got to go get some other stuff done. This went actually far longer than I thought, but that's what happens when you just ask me to sit here and break down things. I will go through all of it and explain in disgusting detail because I love nerding out over these things. So yeah, will we get an upload of just vocals? Probably not. But I will be uploading an instrumental. I keep getting asked this question, so I'm just going to answer it for all of you once again, one more time. Yes, there will be an instrumental released eventually. Probably within the next coming weeks. Kind of want to spread things out because I got some other stuff I need to post. I will have a new remix fairly soon. So I hope you guys will tune in for that. I'll probably post it on Thursday around noon-ish, my time, which would be Central Time. But yeah, hopefully you guys will enjoy that. Follow me on SoundCloud if you're not, at soundcloud.com/gwilliamson. You can already find the remix there. However, there will be a really cool video on here. I hope it's cool. In a bit. It's just a fun little final end of the year remix, but you know, just wanted to let you guys know. If you like the streaming, then you should definitely check me out at twitch.tv/gwilly. Check me out at twitch.tv/gwilly if you will. Thank you and good night. Please go over there, follow me. We mostly just play video games and chill and chat. I talk a lot about music stuff and whatnot. I just stream the music stuff here because I know more people actually care about the music related things here. So just want to categorize things. All right, thank you guys so much for watching. See you guys very soon. Appreciate you guys once again, and I'll see you guys later. All right.